across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very, very good morning to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. Always a pleasure to have your company. Thank you very much indeed, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device. An awful lot, as always, to talk about. A small matter of, the King and Queen over the United States, and the King addressing Congress later today. Sadly, not in my time while I'm on air. But crucially, very big day back here in Parliament for Keir Starmer. He's pleaded with Labour MPs not to vote for a parliamentary ethics probe into whether he lied about the vetting process to appoint Peter Mandelson as the UK's ambassador to the US. I don't want to ruin the plot here. He did lie quite a few times. But he's pleaded with MPs, and given them a 3-line whip. They will be punished if they vote for this, even though it's normally a vote of conscience, such an issue. And if he's so sure that everyone thinks he's telling the truth, including his own backbenchers, and he's got all their support, why is he so worried about them voting against him? Not only that, as we've been hearing, and you've heard on JK's show, we had more bombshell evidence, and it really has been in relation to the Prime Minister from the former Foreign Office Chief Sir Philip Barton. He was in the job before Ollie Robbins, who then got sacked. And we've got at 11 o'clock, and we will take it live, the Prime Minister's own former Chief of Staff, Morgan Mcweeny, from 11. And maybe we might be finding out a little bit more about that mobile phone that conveniently got stolen around the time they had a conversation in Number 10 about, what would happen if all your evidence on your phone, Morgan, ended up going into a probe into whether or not the Prime Minister lied. Just wondering if that might be relevant. Also, we're going to be talking about, once again, shoplifting, with security guards are being categorically told not to stop shoplifters. Why? On health and safety grounds. Now, I do not want the security guards to be getting injured, but we've basically just said it's a free-for-all in our stores. So I don't frankly know why any of us are bothering to pay for anything anymore, because you're not going to go to prison if you steal anyway. No one's going to try and stop you. So just go into a supermarket, go into your corner shop and take what you want, seems to be the message. Anyway, right now, delighted to say we are joined by Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online. A very, very good morning to you. In terms of the conversation today, I'm putting a question out to our audience today about, basically, the Prime Minister pleading with MPs not to vote against him in terms of this ethics probe. Love to hear people's reaction to that. The fact that he's having to give you a 3-line whip. Do give us a call on that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Text the word talk and your message to 87222 and get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged the national rate. Text cost 1, standard network rate message. But of course, right now, all eyes have been on what's going on in Parliament right now, rather than this vote in the Commons chamber later on today. Could be around the 12:45, 1 o'clock mark. And what we've had since 9 o'clock is Sir Philip Barton. They're all sirs, aren't they? All of these people are sirs. Sir Philip Barton, who is the former head of the Foreign Office, the permanent secretary there, so the man in charge of all our Foreign Office, civil servants and the diplomatic corps around the world, would have been, in charge of people like, Lord Mandelson, when he was, would have been most senior diplomat in the world in the US. And in an hour we've got Morgan Mcweeny. But from what we've heard from Philip Barton so far, he's a rather unprepossessing character, as often these civil servants are. But it's been bombshell stuff. There's no doubt at all about it. He's been very clear. The normal process for vetting an ambassador is you vet and then you announce, not the other way around. That didn't happen. So when the Prime Minister said the normal process had been followed, that simply wasn't true. He did say it would have been a crisis if he'd failed vetting Mandelson, because they didn't have an alternative. No one even consulted him. He was the head of the diplomatic corps and no one even asked him. He was just told it was going to be Mandelson. He did say, though, he wasn't pressured out. He didn't leave his job because he'd been pressured over Mandelson. We did say there had been pressure on timing, particularly. There wasn't this call we've all been hearing about, that Morgan Mcweeny, the Chief of Staff, as he was then, had allegedly called him and said, just to prove the effing vetting. He says there was no such call, no swearing, nothing like that. But he basically said, the Cabinet Office didn't even think that Mandelson needed vetting. because he was a peer, so he was already a fit and proper person. And basically, he was never asked. It was presented to him as a fait accompli, and he was very clear that there had been some investigation, the due diligence process, this document that we know the Prime Minister has seen, and it was very clear anything that was concerned had already been raised, and the Downing Street wanted to go ahead. So basically, it was a fait accompli. This is the exact opposite of what the Prime Minister has told us.
No, exactly. It confirms essentially the Ollie Robbins side of the story, who obviously replaced Philip Barton in post at the top of the Foreign Office and said exactly the same things, which is that the tremendous political pressure was put on them to pass this vetting, or at least to do it in a speedy fashion, that there clearly was a conversation, this is something that Robbins referred to in his evidence, between his predecessor and Number 10 about whether or not vetting was even necessary, which given...
I mean, why would you vet a guy who'd been sacked from office twice
more
before?
checkered background than a chessboard, So it's incredible, really, that this is out in the open now. But it is, and it's impossible to deny, and particularly because this has become a discussion, as much as anything else, about what Starmer has said in Parliament, whether or not he misled Parliament. That's something I'm sure that we'll get onto. Yep. So even aside from the fact that the bones of the Mandelson story is still pretty damning, there's also how much Starmer is obviously misleading both the public and MPs every time he opens his mouth about this scandal. I mean,
he really is. I mean, it's actually an interesting piece from Dan Hodges, friend of the show, and he's pointed out, the 7 times the 7 times that Keir Starmer has led the House of Commons or broken the ministerial code, and it is what is really fascinating is this is what Keir Starmer said in 2022. In August 2022, not in August, earlier than that, when he talked about all this stuff about rule breaking, and this is all about Partygate. And can I just say, for the 15th millionth time, the Partygate story was not about someone eating sodding cake. There was a party, proper big party every Friday night throughout lockdowns. From the first lockdown, when we were literally, most of us, I know some of you weren't obeying it. Well, some of us had jobs where they had to. Some of us believed, foolishly, the scientific and medical professor, bosses who were saying to us that, we were all going to die. I'm sorry I did that. I'm sorry I believed, but people like Tom Slater helped to, convince me on the evidence that that was not the case. This was about the Prime Minister and his team locking up the country, ruining us financially, ruining our children's schooling and people's health, and turning the country off, basically. But they carried on partying, and they knew they carried on partying because they knew they weren't at risk, but they did it anyway. Now that is an absolute scandal. I'm delighted that we managed to help force Boris out for that, and it was an outrage. But this is what Keir Starmer had said when the Prime Minister was fighting all these processes to get him out, over him having blatantly, openly lied to Parliament when he said there were no parties in Number 10, when there were photographs of him at parties at Number 10, and not just that one with the cake on his birthday. That wasn't a party. Keir Starmer wrote, the Prime Minister is a national distraction. Millions of people are struggling to pay the bills, but Boris Johnson and his government are spending the whole time mopping up their own rule-breaking, sleaze and deceit. He's got to go. Now, can we not say that today, that we've got war in Iran, war in Ukraine, we've got a call from the Iranian embassy today for there to be basically suicide bombers in the UK, a public call on the Telegram, social media. We've got economic crisis. God knows whether we're going to have enough energy in the next few months at all. We've got job losses. We've got NHS unable to cope. Goodness knows what else is going. We've got shoplifting, we've got violent crime and the rest. And the Prime Minister and his staff are spending all of their time dealing with this crisis over him lying to Parliament and their abject failings over Mandelson. And, oh, by the way, the small point that they put a man who was a national security risk into our top diplomatic job with full vetting. Now, I'm sorry, but the Prime Minister is a national distraction. He's got to go. That's fair, isn't it?
And you could take so many of the high and mighty, pious things that Keir Starmer said around Partygate, switch the names around and it fits perfectly, just as you just saw. Someone really needs to sort of clip up as well. Boris Johnson in the House of Commons saying rules were followed at all times, and Keir Starmer in the House of Commons saying due diligence was followed at all times. It's so strikingly similar. And actually, I think the way in which he's played this is really going to open him up to even more attack, because of the fact that, as many Tories are pointing out, when Boris Johnson was put towards a vote of confidence in relation to ethics and so on, he didn't whip his MPs.
It's a vote of conscience.
Starmer is doing so he's looking even more slippery than the man he said was the most dishonest politician ever to occupy Downing
Street. If you believe that, look, as the Tories as the Labour Party keeps saying, that Tories are just playing political games when we should be discussing important stuff. But yeah, I think Prime Minister lying to Parliament about putting a national security risk into our most getting access to the most important security and defence and economic policies of this government and the secrets. I think that is actually, that's not just gossip and nonsense. That's not someone having an affair or something. I'm sorry. This is Profumo, times 20. I'm sorry. This is a huge issue. But it is extraordinary that he thinks that the message about having a 3-line whip. He went to the PLP, the Parliamentary Labour Party meeting last night. One of the handful of times he's gone, and he spoke to MPs, and he basically pleaded with them. As we were putting on our question, he pleaded with them to vote for him and not to back this he says this bit of game playing by the Tories. But again, at least Boris Johnson had the gumption to have it as a vote of conscience for MPs, and there were Tory MPs who voted for it. But it's very interesting, this current process we've got under the humble address which the Tories put forward, which was basically, we need the government to release everything, what they knew when, what Morgan Mcweeny said to whose phone messages, this and that, so we find out how was this decision made to give Mandelson this job, given what was already known about him, and people, including us, going, is this a good idea? And given what we knew in the public domain, let alone what they had in the private domain at that point. And Labour MPs voted for that.
Yep.
So I wouldn't put it past quite a few Labour MPs, but if it's a 3-line whip, which means you have to do it, otherwise you will lose the whip. Do you think there are going to be MPs who defy?
I mean, there could well be a few. I mean, it's also will kind of depend on how the things settle in the next few hours, how the Morgan Mcweeny evidence lands. The picture could look very different pretty shortly. But I just don't understand why they've put themselves up for this level of unnecessary peril as well, by which I mean the government, because at the end of the day, Labour still has a pretty huge majority. If there were to be people who were to rebel, they would probably still be in the pretty low numbers. Yeah. So it just... it opens up a kind of bigger headache for
and
it.
We've got the local elections and the Scottish and Welsh elections coming up on May the 7th. That's really coming up soon. You're not necessarily going to be wanting to put the Prime Minister in a difficult position. I've got to be honest with you, if I were the Tories Reform, whoever, right now, I've been wanting to keep Keir Starmer in place. He's the most unpopular Prime Minister sort of pretty much ever since polling began. He's obviously hopeless. He hasn't got the support of his MPs, only the support of this lacklustre cabinet until they can get a chance to get him, into the job. The only one who's on polling suggests he might be popular with the public is Andy Burnham. I would question that if and when he became leader, if he did. He's got to get in to be an MP, and we found out apparently, and Keir Starmer basically said everything that is going to be done that can be done to keep Andy Burnham from leaving being Greater Manchester Mayor and becoming standing as an MP. I just, if I were the Tories, and if I were Reform, if I were the Lib Dems group, I'd keep him there. Yeah. You want him walking wounded. Everyone knows he's a dead man walking. Everyone knows he's not fighting the next election. Keep him there. Have him limping on. No, I agree with you. I mean, I think that Andy Burnham is not nearly as strong a candidate as some people like to make out. Flip-flop Andy. But at the same time, anything would look better than the current occupant. There would be a bit of a sort of new manager bounce, to use it. At least he can communicate. He can talk like a normal human being. He's got a pulse, which you can't say is the same of Keir Starmer even before this string of scandals. So I agree with you. I think that whilst where Keir Starmer is concerned, I think all his premiership is about now is clinging on for as long as possible. Yeah. There's no bandwidth to do anything else. And that's the thing with scandals. It's about the substance of the scandal, but also how long it goes on for, how much it crowds out everything and the cover-up of the scandal, which is what has repeatedly happened. And as I was mentioning earlier, Dan Hodges revealed this 7 times that Starmer has misled the House of Commons. And you think, oh, this is just processology. It does matter. It does matter that government ministers and when you come to the House of Commons and you make a statement that has to be factually true, or whatever you believe to be fact, you have to knowingly mislead the House. But it is not possible that he factually believed that back in September 25, when he said to the House of Commons, full due process was followed during Mandelson appointment, as it is with all ambassadors. The exact opposite of every other appointment was followed. The exact opposite. It's just the advice of his own cabinet secretary at the time, Simon Case. I mean, he's 3 on already. The man goes through stuff like I go through personal tablets in the laundry, for God's sake. And his advice at the time was, he needs to be vetted before you can even announce the appointment. He was announced, then they started the vetting process. He did not pass the vetting process, and then he was given the job, and then we've seen what happened as a result of that. You know what, Tom? It's almost like there's a reason why you vet people in these jobs. Do you think there was a reason why that system happened?
Well, this is the thing. Aside from all of the obvious dodgy game playing and the fact that so much pressure was put on the Foreign Office to basically make this happen in as short a time as possible, people will be wondering, what is the point of having vetting if it happens after the appointment is announced, if you can fail, or at least according to Ollie Robbins, get very close to failing your security clearance, and that only means that maybe a few mitigations are put in place. I mean, the process seems absurd as much as anything. But this is the problem. It's quite clear that Downing Street decided that, yes, this guy is slippery with a checkered past, to put it very lightly in a legally airtight way. But we don't care because we think he will be useful.
So good.
You know, his sort of political stardust, the fact that he knows where all the bodies are buried in all kinds of different places, will be of use to us. That's what happened, and they essentially bounced the system into delivering that outcome. Yeah. They can hide behind process. Keir Starmer can say, well, I didn't explicitly tell them to do this, or I didn't explicitly lie about that. The thrust of the story is clear for anyone else to see.
Yeah. But they think we're stupid. This is the thing. One key thing we've learned about this Downing Street is they think we're stupid. That's one of the issues I had with Boris Johnson, when he would say things that were blatantly untrue. And I said to him once, you know, I'm not one of your wives or mistresses, mate. I'm not a fool. I'm not going to believe everything you say. I mean, that didn't go down very well with him, I have to say. But I felt it was a fair point. This was a man who was used to just bumbling along and saying nonsense and everyone going along with it. And Keir Starmer's got that pomposity and that, you know, the way he gets very tetchy when he's asked questions. It's like, you know, oh, how very dare you? It's like, mate, you're a publicly elected official. That's what we do. We ask questions of you. Anytime, Keir, my love, do come on the show.
Ooh,
happy to chat.
Office,
come on. I mean, you know, just saying. If you're brave enough, mate, which you're definitely not. But you know, I've got the receipts. He has blatantly. I mean, he's misrepresented people like Ollie Robbins. Yeah. You know, and it's quite clear. Ollie Robbins' evidence is being backed up by his predecessor. That when he says, you know, there was a lot of pressure put on, and that basically there was no interest in whether this guy Mandelson was vetted or not, and it was going to happen no matter what. That's all being backed up, and he's also been backed up by the former head of security at the Foreign Office, or head of vetting at the Foreign Office, Ian Collard. He gave some written answers to questions from the Foreign Affairs Select Committee yesterday, when there are so many names involved in this, and he stated that, yes, he had told Robbins that Mandelson was a borderline case in terms of vetting, and that the decision was for the Foreign Office to make whether or not they would improve. And he's like, well, he's already basically in the building. They're going to want him to pre-approve, so he approved him. And of course, the big argument that Starmer is pretending to have now is, I sacked him because he didn't tell me he'd been red flagged. Now, this guy Ian Collard, the former head of vetting at the Foreign Office, the guy in charge of doing this developed vetting, he said he had not told Robbins that Mandelson was a red flag. He told him that he was borderline. I mean, this is weird. Yeah. This is now getting weird. Why have you not told the head of the permanent secretary at the Foreign Office that this guy was red flag? And why did the head of the Foreign Office not go, oh, he's borderline to number 10? No, I mean, none of them. They're all talking to each other every day. No one mentions any of the key facts. We have a crisis of incompetence. Yeah. The very best, it's your best case scenario, a crisis of incompetence at the top of our civil service. I mean, tell us something we don't know, right? But it's interesting, Kemi Badenoch has already responded to Philip Barton's evidence. He's still giving evidence, by the way. You'll see it if you're watching on our YouTube screen. But I think the substance we've got, but if there's anything new, we'll bring it to you. But I don't think we want to do 2 hours of Philip Barton. But the Tory leader has said that she said there is no doubt in my mind that the Prime Minister has lied and has repeatedly misled the House. That is why I'm asking a committee, this is the Privileged Committee, to look at this. I'm not asking Labour MPs to remove the Prime Minister. I'm not asking this particular moment to resign. This is all about the committee, and that evidence proves what I've been saying. If we cannot trust our Prime Minister to tell us the truth about a simple matter, how can we trust him on anything? And that is the key thing. There was due diligence that Peter Mandelson was a security risk. The Cabinet Office didn't really care whether there was any vetting at all. When the vetting came back, red flag stroke borderline, he got approved anyway. Everyone felt, well, the pressure was on, you have to do it. The Prime Minister said repeatedly there was no pressure whatsoever, he said at PMQs last week. Extraordinarily misquoting, quite, I would say, deliberately misquoting what Ollie Robbins had told the Commons Select Committee the day before. I thought quite outrageously. On that alone, he should resign. But there are 7 times when he's blatantly clearly said things which are provably untrue. Well, certainly other credible evidence given by a number of different people had said something very different. I mean, as we were asking yesterday, does he survive this?
Especially because the government is hardly making great guns of all the other things it's working on, especially because of the fact that his sole claim to high office was that he was Mr. Rules, he was Mr. Principles, he was going to dispel this period of Johnsonian lies and fake news and what have you. And chaos. And we've ended up with all of those things. And I think it's almost, there's something worse than being a liar, and it's being a hypocrite, and he's proven himself to be a bit of both.
We don't like that in Britain, do we? That
really
we forgive, we're very forgiving. And it's like, if someone has an affair or makes a mistake, we are incredibly forgiving as voters and as a country of people, and politicians in particular. It's like, fair enough. And it is extraordinary how many politicians don't get that, just fessing up and going, look, I made a mistake. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. Or that policy was wrong, or I said something that was wrong. But they always double down.
Yeah, always. And I think it's because they think they can get away with it. They think they can take the public for fools.
They think they're cleverer than us.
And also with Keir Starmer, he thought that he could kind of hide behind the process, that because technically speaking it wasn't the case, that he was fully, aware.
No one told me, so I didn't know.
It was ultimately his defence, that I didn't know what was going on.
I don't pay attention to any detail.
Lord knows what he's spending his time doing. But it's...
he's sorting out the economy. Laser focus, mate. Laser focus.
That's truu. And that laser focus is burning a hole through the economy as well, as I can tell, at this point. But it's a complete mess. And it's however you stack it up, it adds up to a position of weakness. Begging your own MPs to save your skin. This is not a Prime Minister who's long for this world. The only thing that's keeping him in place is the weakness of the alternatives to him, and the fact that the markets will probably be a bit jittery if we change the people at the top again. Yeah. That's the 2 things holding them in place, and you'll notice both those things are very negative. It's basically
you'll do for now. You're not as bad as some of the alternatives. It is extraordinary. I'd love to hear from you where you are on this. I mean, if you genuinely want to call in, you just say, I just think this doesn't matter. Why on earth, Julia, are you talking about this again? I'd like to hear from you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Does it matter if he lied to Parliament? Should Labour MPs have their guts to vote for that, saying, look, we're not saying you lied, Prime Minister, but there's enough, evidence to suggest it's worth an investigation, and we trust the process, and we're voting with our conscience. Because one of the things that Reform and the Tories have said very, very clearly is any Labour MP who votes with the government on this is going to have that flagged up at every single election, every point. You basically back the Prime Minister, who everyone knows has lied. And everyone but Keir Starmer knows that he's lied. I don't think, maybe Vic, maybe his wife, maybe not, I don't know, she isn't. But can we get a small point of the King addressing the Congress today? It's going to be about 8 p.m, I think, UK time, when he addresses Congress, about 25-minute speech we expect. Apparently he's going to talk about that assassination attempt, and the government has actually been charged with attempted assassination of Trump as well as other crimes. But also he's going to stick up for the Royal Navy and for NATO, and talk about how many times we've come apart, but the UK and the US always come back together. Do you think this little exercise in soft power is going to work?
Well, the one thing you can say about Trump and the King is that Trump really seems to like the King. Will take every opportunity to sing his praises.
He's my friend. He's my friend.
Yeah, fantastic gentleman, fantastic leader. Even though Charles, politically speaking, not necessarily on the same page, even though he's quite clearly sort of shocked and appalled probably by many of the things that the Trump administration is doing, not just on defence, but in general.
The King is I use this term advisedly, he's an eco-loon.
Absolutely, which is not clear, exactly on board with the sort of drill baby drill position of the US administration. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes down, because I've always wondered at what point could there be some kind of rift between the royal family and between the Trumps, because if you have the King essentially there issuing a series of almost diplomatic sly digs to the president.
I mean, it'll be carefully vetted. I don't know, what about if Camilla sort of throws a glass of red wine over Melania? Yeah. I mean, there could be... Just
all hell breaks loose. But, and I don't think it will necessarily happen during this royal visit, but there's no one that Donald Trump isn't capable of falling out with. If he's going to have a beef with the Pope...
This is true.
The King of the...
Yeah, with an American Pope as well. Yeah, OK, indeed. Fascinating. There's only one other story I want to mention. It turns out that chips pinched from a friend's plate really do taste better. But it's still chips from someone else, that you will think they taste better than when they're on your own plate. Yeah. But this is true of all food.
All food that's stolen tastes better.
Yes. Weston Pinch hasn't, you know...
This is the shoplifting epidemic summed up. It tastes so much better when you just rob it.
It's true, though. It's true. I'm one of those people. People say, "Can I have one of your chips?" I always go, "Do I look like someone who shares food?" That's always my... Do I look like someone who shares food?
Should we bring it off of a mug to let them take those chips?
No, my thing is always like, "I'm going to get some chips. Anyone else want chips?" They go, "No." I go, "Right. You sure? Because you're not having any of mine." I then order 2 portions of chips. One for me. And I go, "One. There's your lot. I want my chips."
I think
just saying. But then I take theirs because they taste better.
There we go, exactly. You deprive them of the opportunity of stealing. That's the thing. So.
Anyway, 10:27 is the time. I want to hear from you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. We've got more evidence from this former Foreign Office chief. We've got the former chief of staff for the Prime Minister giving evidence. I mean, this is what everyone is focused on right now. Small issues of the economy and the like. Now, the Prime Minister says we should be focusing on that stuff, the important stuff, war, the economy, NHS, rather than defence spending, rather than whether he lied to Parliament and who said what and the vetting of Mandelson. But it does matter, doesn't it? Tell me if you think it does. Tell me if you think it doesn't. Does the Prime Minister survive? Give us a call. This is Talk.
I hope I wouldn't have used that. Well, certainly I don't remember trying to get any job for my mates.
Can you get a job? Can you help get a job for ex's mates? But don't tell the Foreign Secretary.
I don't think it's completely surprising that the Prime Minister would be so sensitive about the way in which he was dealing with a member of his senior team, and particularly a Director of Communications who's in minute-by-minute contact with the media, that he would want that kept to a very, very tight group of people at the time.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back to the show. 10:30 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls. Andrew is in Hertfordshire. Andrew, what do you make of where we are with Starmer and the Mandelson vetting and all this evidence? Are you keeping abreast of it all for a start?
Yeah, the ones you've got to feel sorry for are the victims of Epstein and the victims of the rape gang. Look at the Labour Party covering the backside of the Prime Minister. It's utterly disgraceful. And the reality of it is that he, as an individual, if you're telling the truth, sunlight, best disinfectant, just say, yeah, okay, go through the lobbies, do whatever you will. I'll live or die by it.
Yeah. But
this is the same as Labour councillors making sure that rape gang victims weren't heard and silencing them. And it's really important to the victims. And I'm apoplectic with rage over this.
Yeah. Well, that said, I mean, look, I think the victims, of course, the victims of the Jeffrey Epstein and others are crucial. However, not to this issue. This is a national security issue and an honesty issue with our Prime Minister. No one is claiming that Peter Mandelson was involved in their abuse. No one is claiming that Keir Starmer was. I mean, no one is making these claims. It was the vetting of the man who had exhibited extraordinary poor judgment and was already considered to be someone who was not to be trusted with state secrets before the current criminal investigations that Mandelson is facing. So, to a certain extent, when people sort of focus, it's got to be about the Epstein victims. I think that is a sideline. Not saying they are unimportant. I'm saying this scandal isn't about them.
Okay, and we're on board with that. I'd love to have a glass of wine and chat through it. Remember, when Mcweeny sits there, he's the man that left Mandelson looking after his children. Now, if Kirsty Allsop gets reported to social services for letting her son go around Europe, why isn't Mcweeny getting his children some counselling to find out what happened?
No. Well, he left his friend and mentor at the time, Mandelson. I mean, there was never been any allegations that I've ever heard at all, or even behind the scenes or anything, about Mandelson being in any way a predator. I'm sorry. We can look. You know, that's. I think I've got to be honest with you, Andrew. I'm going to massively disagree with you on that. I mean, listen until you know something different from me. I'm going to have to leave it there. I want to do a couple of messages before we go to break. Thank you for that, Andrew, though. Mike says we must have transparency on this. Bruce says Starmer's a dictator by threatening the whip on his MPs. Charlie says anyone who backs his Prime Minister lacks morals or any other scruples whatsoever. Kirsten says no standards, Labour. Remember when they said what they said about Boris? Why doesn't the same apply to them? They're hypocrites. Ashraf says to be expected with the Prime Minister basically having that three-line whip. He's never cared for Britain, only his own selfish ways. Michael says, I think it should be put to a vote of the people. Well, it kind of will be, won't it, on May the 7th and indeed at the next general election. Marion says Starmer will get away with it. All he has to do is threaten them with an early general election. Then they will do what they need to do to save their skins. I mean, he's not going to threaten them with an early general election. He's not that. I mean, he's not as bright as he thinks he is, but he's not that stupid. Margot says simply he's unfit for the highest office in the UK. Hear to that. Right now, let's go to a quick break. Up next, going to ask Brendan O'Neill what he makes of it all. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and delighted to say Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, joins us, and someone he knows very well. Also joins us, political writer and author Brendan O'Neill. A very good morning to you, Brendan.
Hi, Julia. How's it going?
Very well. Thank you very much indeed. And I'm sure you've been glued to all the evidence we've had previously from Sir Ollie Robbins and the statements from the Prime Minister, the House of Commons, PMQs and other times, and indeed the evidence we've got still ongoing, actually, from Philip Barton, the man who was in charge of the Foreign Office before Sir Ollie Robbins. There seem to be a lot of these people. And, of course, from 11, we're going to be taking live Morgan Mcweeny, the Prime Minister's former Chief of Staff, and him of the stolen phone saga, when he gives evidence. And there's no doubt at all, it's all been box office. There might be sort of grey mandarins, but actually what they are telling us is really, really very clear. Basically, the Prime Minister has lied and lied again. The vetting process to appoint Mandelson as an ambassador was not followed. There was pressure on the Foreign Office to approve him, regardless of whether he passed vetting or not. And the Prime Minister, not unreasonably, is going to face a vote at lunchtime today over whether or not he should be investigated by the Privileges and an Ethics Committee over whether he lied to Parliament. What do you make of it all?
Well, I'm looking forward to Morgan Mcweny's testimony because I want to know what happened to that phone. I'm absolutely intrigued that someone with such an important phone managed to get it nicked. It's box office. It's soap opera. I'm tucking into the popcorn and watching it like a lot of other people. I was going to say everyone else, but it's not everyone, actually.
People have got jobs.
Yeah, people are working, but I think us media types and SW1 people are obsessed with it, and that's because it's an important scandal. We shouldn't downplay it. There was part of me that thought, are we blowing this out of proportion and just creating a sideshow for lazy people in SW1 to keep themselves occupied. But actually, it's an important scandal because, as you said earlier, it does raise questions about national security, about government competence, about the clash between government and civil service. It does raise all sorts of questions about how Whitehall functions or doesn't function.
Yeah.
That's important.
Absolutely. And again, when the Prime Minister says, oh, look, this doesn't matter, this is, we should be focusing on the important things. He did an interview last night, a media interview, and he was talking about how, what the public want, what the public care about is me getting on with the job and standing up to, to Trump and all. I mean, he keeps pushing that. He thinks he's going to get another blip in the polls. And, mate, that ship has sailed, or not sailed through the streets of Hormuz anyway. We've had any ships for them to sail, which we don't. But he's saying this is unimportant. But Prime Ministers lying to Parliament, Prime Ministers allowing their staff to put their buddies into most senior diplomatic role and get most unbelievably high access to our darkest, deepest, most important state secrets. If that isn't a serious and important topic, I don't know what is.
Well, exactly. It's a question of, can we trust the people who rule over us? And I think it's become pretty clear over the past 2 years that this is a government without a vision. They don't really know what they stand for or what they want to do for the country. They U-turn morning, noon and night. They have a plan and then they ditch it. They're doing things they promised they wouldn't do, that they didn't have in the manifesto. They're screwing over working class people and pensioners and everyone else. So we know they don't have a vision. But one thing they said they did have was competence. They said they were skillful, they were managers, they were, we might be a managerial class, we might be a bit dull, but at least we can get things done. We now know that even that's not true. We now know that even their technocratic capacity was wildly over exaggerated, and in fact they're not even good at that aspect of their job either. So there's a question mark dangling over this government, and I think they haven't answered it properly yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Again, it's the chaos that we were told we were leaving behind is engulfed us. And by the way, within only 18 months of this government starting, I mean, frankly, it was within a few weeks that the poll ratings were started to plummet when everyone realised, oh, this guy is just a completely empty vessel, apart from when he's slagging us all off and calling us all far right. I mean, the U-turns, the incompetence, the flagging growth, the blaming of everyone, sacking of anyone who he thinks he can take a fall for him. None of it is coming across very well for him. Here's the question though. We've got this vote in the House of Commons at lunchtime, and the Commons speakers agreed that it should go ahead without making a judgment on whether what the answer will be. But the Tories have pushed for this vote on whether or not there should be a Privileges Committee investigation. Bearing in mind that was the committee that basically found that Boris Johnson had lied to the House. Now, he was already no longer Prime Minister. He'd been forced out already by his cabinet, basically the whole government kind of resigning. He couldn't actually fill enough government posts. He had to go. But he left as an MP, and he said, this is an outrageous, kangaroo court. Well, but it wasn't a kangaroo court. It's a crossbench group of MPs who, due diligence, took their role very seriously and quite rightly found that he had, what we all knew, had lied to the House. But is there an argument where actually this is a bad move for the Tories? Because what they should really do, a point I've made to your colleague Tom Slater earlier, is actually keep Keir Starmer in place, because he is so universally unpopular, so unliked, so untrusted. It's not bad for any of the opposition parties to keep him in position.
Well, that's a very good point. And, I've often said that the only thing that Keir Starmer has going for him at the moment is the cowardice of the backbenchers, the cowardice of his own factional opponents. There's no one who really seems keen to make a move, certainly not before 7th of May. Maybe they're waiting and sharpening their knives for after that catastrophe at the election at the ballot box. But yeah, maybe the Tories should leave him there, because he is so catastrophically unpopular and people just do not warm to him or like him or trust him. So perhaps they should leave him in place. But one thing I keep thinking is that there is this mistake being made amongst some people that Labour is facing a personnel crisis. Yeah. And if only we had Angela Rayner and Burnham at the top, kind of doing their Northern double act, or if we had the second coming of Ed Miliband as a leader of Labour all over again, then everything would be fine. That's not true, because what we're witnessing is not just the crisis of Keir Starmer's government, but the crisis of Labour. Yeah. This is the death throes of a political party that was founded 126 years ago to represent the working class people of this country, and which no longer does that, and therefore doesn't know what it's for. So all this backstabbing, all these sideshows, as thrilling and important as they are actually just expressions of a deeper malaise within Labour, and there's no fixing that.
Yeah, indeed. And we've seen, I mean, lots of people say it's the end of the two-party system, but they said that in 2010 and 2015. Cameron got a majority. So, I mean, well, I'd be very wary when people sort of predict, oh, this is all going to change. Now we're in multi-party politics. You can't predict anything. But that's, I think, very exciting, because I've always hated the fact that you could, the idea you could put a red rosette or a blue rosette, depending on the constituency, on a pig, and they would definitely get elected. I think it's really good that parties are going to have to fight for our votes. My worry is, and I'm not going to worry people going to the extremes. Hey, maybe we do actually have to have a Green Party in charge. We haven't hit rock bottom yet, Brendan. We may have to go that low before people wake up and realise how bad things are in this country in terms of our economy and our governance. But at the end of the day, it's really good that parties actually have to listen to what people want.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're living through a kind of peaceful, bloodless revolt where millions of working class people, using reason and deduction, have decided that Labour no longer represents them and they're going to take a punt on reform. I mean, that is the general drift of politics right now.
Or the Greens.
Or the Greens, yeah. The Greens seem to be enticing away Labour's kind of middle-class keffiyeh-wearing public sector working people, whereas Reform seems to be enticing away their old working-class base.
The people with jobs.
And that seems to be with people who actually work. That seems to be the divide at the moment. But it's so interesting that Labour looks down its nose at its old voters. It sees them as gammon. It sees them as Europhobic. It thinks that they landed us in this problem by voting for Brexit 10 years ago. Working voters are not stupid. They know when they're being sneered at, and they're saying, listen, if you're giving up on us, we're going to give up on you and take a chance on a different party. So a massive realignment seems to be taking place. You're right that it's unpredictable. We don't know where it will go. We don't know how it will play out. But that is exciting. And I'm sorry to say it, but the death of the Labour Party feels quite exciting as well, because it really has betrayed so many of its voters.
But it is fascinating, and lots of people predict it was the death of the Tory party. And although their poll ratings are still down, Kemi Badenoch's poll ratings as leader are looking up. Again, I worry of anyone who makes predictions on these things, other than the fact that I think we can safely say Keir Starmer will not be the leader of the Labour Party either at the next election or, I would say, by the end of the summer. Can I ask you about something else? And this is incredibly worrying, and again, something that we should be doing something about and worrying about. Not that I think that the Prime Minister ever does anything about anything, but this is the most extraordinary situation where the Iranian embassy in the UK, the Tehran embassy, has basically called on Iranians in this country, or Islamists in this country, at least, because many Iranians obviously here are massively opposed to the regime in Tehran, to basically sacrifice their lives for the regime. I mean, that's just code for suicide bomb. They've urged UK residents willing to die for the regime to sign up to an official martyrdom programme. Massive security concerns about this. They want to register for a Jan Fada, sacrificing life programme, for all brave and noble children of Iran, with a desire for the people's defence of the land of Iran to come forward in a display of solidarity, loyalty and national zeal. Now, this is on the embassy's official Telegram channel. Says, let us all, to a man, give our bodies to be slain, for it is better than giving our country to the enemy. We haven't even got the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. They're Stasi. We haven't actually got them yet prescribed, although that's apparently now on the cards. And we've got an embassy of a country where they are literally calling openly for suicide bombings in this country to defend their horrific, quite literally Islamo-fascist regime. What do you make of that?
It's really horrific. I can't believe the IRCG hasn't been prescribed yet. I can't believe we still have an Iranian embassy in London. That should have been closed down after 7th of October, a day on which 18 British citizens, the vast majority of them Jews, were murdered by an Iranian proxy. Do we take seriously the lives of British Jews, or do we not? That embassy should have been closed on that day. It's really shocking, and it should be taken incredibly seriously, because it was only a couple of weeks ago that there was a spate of attempted fire bombings of synagogues and other Jewish institutions in London, and one of the lines of inquiry is that was organised, or at least kind of encouraged by the Iranian regime. We'll see how that plays out. So we should take take this seriously. But one thing that really worries me right now is that it seems that we can have all these attacks on Jewish communities, the killing of Jews, the attacks on Jewish synagogues, the burning down of 4 ambulances in Golders Green, this kind of relentless attack on our Jewish citizens. And it just becomes old news the next week. People forget about it. The left never beats the street in protest against anti-Semitism.
No.
They inflame it. The government forgets about it. Politicians look the other way. The speed with which this is forgotten horrifies me. And I think we need to take the threat from Iran and from anti-Semites in our own country very seriously.
Absolutely. And remember, they're not just coming for Jewish people. They're coming for everybody in the West. People really, really need to understand that. It is absolutely crucial. It is just extraordinary to me that all the government's efforts are not dealing with that right now, frankly, the threat on our streets. And there will be another terrorist attack in this country, and we will have failed to deal with it. But here's the thing. Do I trust anyone vetting people coming into this country, by the way, including the people who are arriving on the small boats? And we know there are people from that regime who would have arrived who are terrorists. We've had the security services talk about that risk before. When they can't even vet a bloke everyone knows has had to resign twice for lying, from being our most senior ambassador, seeing our biggest defence and military secrets, and who knows, as far as I'm aware, they've not even started the formal inquiry into whether or not, while ambassador to the US, whether or not he had given away any information and given the formal criminal investigation to what he did, what he's alleged to have done in 2009, and that's still ongoing. We haven't even started, I think, getting to the bottom of this. The can of worms is open, and they are still coming out at an incredible rate. But do I trust that we're going to protect ourselves against a terrorist attack? Absolutely not. Brendan O'Neill, great to talk to you as always, political writer and author. Let's go straight to a break. Up next, we're going to be talking about the other stuff we don't protect ourselves from, and that's basically lawlessness on our streets when it comes to things like shoplifting. Talked about it yesterday as well. But basically, we now have a free-for-all. Security guards have been told categorically, you do not stop shoplifters because it's a health and safety issue. So, guys, just so you know from now on, fill your boots, fill your basket, fill your trolley. No one's going to stop you. We just don't have to pay for things anymore. I'm sure that'll work out well. This is Talk.
I hope I wouldn't have used that. Well, certainly I don't remember trying to get any job for my mates.
Can you get a job? Can you help get a job for ex's mates? But don't tell the Foreign Secretary.
I don't think it's completely surprising that the Prime Minister would be so sensitive about the way in which he was dealing with a member of his senior team, and particularly a director of communications who's in minute-by-minute contact with the media, that he would want that kept to a very, very tight group of people at the time.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:51 is the time. Tom Slater is still with me. Tom, just checking, when you go to the local store, when you get some milk, when you go to the supermarket, maybe buying clothes or whatever, do you queue up to pay?
Oh, I haven't paid in years. You don't have to anymore. Have you not noticed?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm thinking, because I'm thinking we're all mugs, aren't we, for paying?
The rest of you are. I've been...
You've been shoplifting for years.
Oh, yeah.
I'm hoping, judging by the twinkle in his eye, that that's not true. But that seems to me to be the message, because I'm one of those people that does shout at the shoplifter or shout at the guy, going through the barrier behind me on the tube. Go, oh, it's all right, no, I'll pay for you as well. Because when people shoplift and they don't pay, we end up paying more for our goods. It's not eaten up in the profits. We end up paying more to pay for them. But it is extraordinary, all the stories we've been doing about shoplifting. The Prime Minister announcing yesterday, there's going to be a clampdown. Is there, mate? Because even if you arrest people and even if you charge people, the reality is if you get sentenced to less than a year, which is what they usually are sentenced to, if they get sentenced to any time in prison at all, they are not actually going to prison, because that's under the new rule. You don't serve any sentences under a year. But we are now being told that union bosses of the Security Industry Federation, they are saying security guards absolutely categorically must not stop shoplifters because of health and safety. They're explicitly ordering them not to intervene over theft. Well, let's talk to Roy Ram, former commander of specialist operations at New Scotland Yard. Morning to you, Roy.
Good morning.
What a surprise. Then you're unlikely to get caught. You're unlikely to get stopped if you are caught. You're unlikely to get arrested if you are caught. You're unlikely to get charged. And if you do get charged, you get prosecuted. Your odds are you're not going to go to prison. No wonder it's a free-for-all for shoplifters.
Yeah, it does feel slightly bonkers, doesn't it?
Slightly.
I mean, you know, to start with the security guards, you don't apply for the job. Don't become a security guard unless you're prepared to be, in some sense, in conflict with somebody.
I think you're being unfair on them. They're basically told, and we've seen this. We had not just a security guard at an M&S, but a manager at Morrison's, both of whom have got sacked for tackling.
I know. And you don't apply for a job, or you shouldn't apply for a job unless you know what it's about and understand it, that you might actually have to stop somebody and challenge their dishonesty. So the first thing is what the security industry is saying about its instructions to its guards, the unions are saying, is nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. The second thing is that stores should not employ security guards at all unless they're prepared to support them.
Yeah, what is the point? That's how I'm looking at my local supermarket. The guys, they basically, two different entrances. One stands in front of the booze, one stands in one of the other entrances, and they basically stand there, and it does deter. If one of them has to move, absolutely guaranteed the organised criminals, which is what it is now, come running in and grab everything, which does put other shoppers at risk as well.
Yes, it does. And another thing, I mean, this plan to have a specific offence of assault on on retail workers. Well, most security guards are in fact subcontracted, so they possibly wouldn't even be covered by that. But even that, it looks like a bit of a political stunt, in so much that an assault is an assault. There's always been crimes of common assault occasioning actual bodily harm, grievous bodily harm. So I'm not entirely sure why we need a specific offence in relation to retail staff.
Yeah, indeed. And again, I don't think that's what's going to deter people. But at the end of the day, I mean, we've got security guards, and I've said people told me in a number of different stores, I've asked around in my local high street, that they try and stop these people. The police do nothing. They're not arrested. They go, they do get violent, these people. They're in trouble. They then get in trouble or lose their jobs. If they get injured, they ain't going to be paid because, well, you're in breach of your contract. And there is also an issue where when like a Waitrose or an M&S or a Sainsbury's employs security guards because they've got the money to afford it, that just means that the shoplifters go to the smaller stores, the mom and pop stores where they can't afford it. But what we need is a simple rule, like if you get caught shoplifting, you go to prison.
What we also need, Julia, it is somebody to get a grip of policing numbers.
Yeah.
Since 2016, just two statistics. Since 2016, the population of the UK has increased by 7 million people. Mm-hmm. The number of police officers has dropped by 7,000. Yeah. So we've got more people, we've got more immigrants who, many of them.
We've got higher rates of criminality among some groups,
And we've got a higher rate of criminality, but we haven't got the officers to deal with it. And until somebody says, actually, 3,000 to drop in the ocean. We need another 25,000 police officers, and we need to police high streets properly and ensure that the small stores can rely on a police officer turning up and getting somebody into the criminal justice system and prosecuting them before.
But the police often say to the stores, don't they, Maya, they say, well, there's no point. Okay, we can arrest the guy, but nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen to them. And at this point, we've been told, well, it used to be that £100 limit, well, don't bother prosecuting under that, and then 200. Of course, they still like literally £199 worth of goods because nothing's going to happen. I mean, that's, the fact that anyone thought that was a good idea is terrifying. They should be, taken out and pummeled with tomatoes in the street for being so stupid. But then you get a situation where, well, if you're sentenced to under a year, or a year under, you're not going to go to prison. And we know that a lot of the community orders they get. I mean, what do these people care about community orders? They're tagged or not tagged. No one cares what they do. No one punishes them. They don't. The first time they breach the community order, they're not sent to prison. This is a free-for-all. We have basically lost absolute control of our streets. We've got bikes and scooters whizzing along, knocking old ladies over and kids over, people going through red lights, litter everywhere. We've got people just running into stores and taking stuff. I mean, the rest of us are mugs, aren't we? Because we're paying for it all, and we're paying extra when we buy our goods because we're the mugs you queue up at the till.
I think that what you're seeing from a lot of the things that you're just mentioning is really corrosive.
Yeah.
Really corrosive to society, and the lack of consequences for misconduct is horrific. And parents of youngsters have got a role to play in this.
Yep.
Knowing what your children are doing when they're out. But coming,
and also, if they walk in with a new pair of trainers or a phone. Where have you got that from?
Yeah, sure. But consequences need to be at the top of the agenda.
But here's the thing: why do we need to have speeches from the Prime Minister yesterday, announcements from press, we're going to have a crackdown on this, a crackdown on that? This is policing 101.
Well, of course it is, and that's absolutely why I come back to this issue of a specialist offence for assault on. If you punch somebody, if you barge them or hurt them, does it really matter that they're a retail worker or is somebody in the street? Suppose the shoplifter runs out and a member of the public tackles them.
Yeah.
What do you get charged with then? I mean, it's just political posturing.
It really is. We need to know that people don't get punished when they are tackling someone committing a crime. People go, but it's about property. Yeah, you know what? Property matters to people. It does. Roy Ram, great to talk to you, former commander of Specialist Operations at New Scotland Yard. Tom Slater, I mean, these stories, I find myself just getting more and more help. People go, it's only shoplifting. It's livelihoods. Businesses are closing down because of this, and customers and staff are at risk.
No, absolutely. And the message that is being sent, not just from the state, not just from the police and the criminal justice system, but also from shops themselves. These policies that we're reading about in a Waitrose or a Morrison's or wherever, where even when staff feel emboldened and take the personal choice to confront shoplifters,
they are punished.
They are punished.
It's
so it's a free-for-all. What do you expect?
It really is. Well, it's all right for you because you're just shoplifting. But anyway,
exactly.
He was joking, everybody. Someone will make a complaint. Someone reading The Guardian will make a complaint. They don't understand humour. We're going to the top of the hour. We're going to hear the latest news. Then we're going to hear the bombshell evidence from Morgan Mcweeny, the Prime Minister's former Chief of Staff, over the vetting of Manderson and that scandal. We're going to take that live. Stay tuned. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. Fast approaching 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you are listening on DAB+ radio, watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, lots to talk about. It's a very big day for Keir Starmer. At lunchtime, we're going to have a parliamentary vote on whether or not there should be a parliamentary ethics probe, similar to that probe that went into Boris Johnson over Partygate, and MPs are going to get voted. Now, normally that would be a free vote, but it's not this time, because Keir Starmer has basically given a three-line whip and pleaded last night with Labour MPs to not vote for that probe into whether or not he lied, brackets, he did lie, close brackets, about the vetting process to appoint Peter Mandelson as the UK's ambassador to the US, probably one of the most biggest national security scandals we've had in decades. Now, this morning, for about an hour and three quarters, we had bombshell evidence from the former Foreign Office Chief, Sir Philip Barton, and he's been giving evidence to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. This is after Ollie Robbins, the guy who got sacked for the vetting scandal, even though, of course, it's actually Keir Starmer who should be sacked over it. And any moment now, we're going to have the Prime Minister's own former Chief of Staff, Morgan Mcweeny, and he's going to be giving evidence. We will be taking that evidence live. You do not want to miss that. Don't forget, also, the King's on the second day of a royal visit to the US. He's going to give a speech to Congress. It's going to be at 8 o'clock tonight, our time. He's going to call on the US and Britain to come together, even when they do not agree. We're doing that old soft power thing. Right now, I'd like to say Tom Slater joins us, editor of Spiked Online. So as soon as the Foreign Affairs Select Committee finish their little break they're taking between evidence sessions, quick trip to the loo, get a cup of tea. Morgan Mcweeny is going to be in the chair. In terms of what we learned from the evidence session first thing this morning, I mean, the evidence has just been very, very clear. Without a shadow of a doubt, we know, I mean, like we didn't know already, basically that the Prime Minister has lied and lied and lied again. And Philip Barton, the former guy in the job, basically said there was pressure, there was vetting only after the appointment was made. There wasn't that sweary phone call from Mcweeny we'd heard about, and it was basically going to happen no matter what. Let's go straight to that evidence session that's just started. Morgan Mcweeny being questioned by Emily Thornberry, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee.
I understand. Could you just introduce who you are? And I understand that there's a brief statement that you want to make before we ask you some questions.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Morgan Mcweeny. I was a former Chief of Staff to Prime Minister Keir Starmer from October 2024 till February of this year. Chair, thank you for inviting me to appear before this committee today. I hope to assist you in your work as fully as I can. Before addressing the specific matters before you, I'm grateful that you've allowed me to say something briefly. First, I want to say something about the victims and survivors connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Too often, discussions of public figures and appointments can lose sight of the human suffering at the centre of these matters. Women and girls were abused, exploited and scarred. They deserved protection then, and they deserve to be remembered now. I'm sorry for any part this controversy has played in causing further hurt or distress. I've spent much of my working life trying, in whatever role I held, to make this country fairer, stronger and more successful. I have always believed public service is a privilege. It brings responsibility and scrutiny, but it also brings a meaningful chance to improve people's lives. That is what motivated me in government. The appointment of Mandelson as ambassador was a serious error of judgment. I advised the Prime Minister in support of that appointment, and I was wrong to do so. As I said in my resignation statement, I resigned because I believe responsibility should rest with those who make serious mistakes. Accountability in public life cannot apply only when it is convenient. The Prime Minister relied on my advice, and I got it wrong. It is also important, however, to distinguish between what I did do and what I did not do. What I did do was make a recommendation based on my judgment that Mandelson's experience, relationships and political skills could serve the national interest in Washington at an important moment. That judgment was a mistake. What I did not do was oversee national security vetting, ask officials to ignore procedures, request that steps should be skipped, or communicate explicitly or implicitly that checks should be cleared at all costs. I would never have considered that acceptable. These processes are in place to protect our national security. Finally, I want to place on record my respect for those who serve our country through public institutions: MPs, ministers, civil servants, diplomats, security professionals and many others whose work is demanding, often unseen. In the Cabinet Office, the Foreign Office and 10 Downing Street, there will be many people working long hours now to understand what happened here and to ensure lessons are learned. They deserve fairness and respect as they do that work. Chair, I'm here to assist the committee in its work. I made a serious mistake in recommending Mandelson's appointment. I accept the consequences and hope today I can help the committee to establish the facts and to make sure the right lessons are learned.
Thank you. So why was it necessary to replace Karen Pierce at all?
So should I set out the timetable of my understanding of the various different decision making? So
I'm going to do that, but I just wondered if I could just start with, how did it even become an issue?
So my understanding is that before we were in government, the civil service were deciding who to appoint Karen Pierce when her term came to an end, and that in the access talks with Simon Case, Simon Case was informed that the Prime Minister was minded to make a political appointment in the role of ambassador. So that predates my time as a Chief of Staff. At the time, I was working in opposition and I wasn't working as part of the transition team. When I came in as Chief of Staff, I understood that to be the general direction the Prime Minister wanted to go, and that a formal decision was made not until after the US presidential elections, because he rightly wanted to wait until after seeing who was elected US President on the 5th of November.
So is there a note of the discussion around whether or not it should be a political appointment, or are you saying that it was something that had already been decided before Labour got into government?
So I only found out this weekend as I was trying to piece together the full picture, and I called Simon Case to ask him what his recollection was, and his recollection was that February 2024, when he was inquiring about what Labour might want to do with the US ambassador, as they were considering who to replace Karen Pierce with, he was told the Prime Minister was minded to make a political appointment. As far as I know then, the next decision was taken in early November. So the decision by the Prime Minister was formally taken in early November after the US presidential election. So I've seen a box note that went from the Prime Minister's private office, his foreign policy private office and his PPS, and which asked him explicitly would he like to go ahead with a political appointment or make a civil service appointment. I don't recall any conversation about that, and then the next thing is that he is requesting who could potentially fill that post.
So that's the box note of the 11th of November, which is on page 2 of the humble address materials, and it's a PS note to the Prime Minister.
Yes,
it talks about that the current ambassador to Washington has been making good inroads with the Trump team, and then talks about on timing of appointment and announcement. It's talking about what the options are essentially.
Yes, and I didn't input into that box note.
No. And neither did anybody else, it looks like. When it comes to the Prime Minister's comments on it or the Outer Office comments, there wasn't anything on that.
So I don't think there was any input from any of the SPADs into that. It was just a straightforward, what would you like to do, Prime Minister, but there wasn't a recommendation.
There was a list of candidates. David Miliband, Cathy Ashdown, Peter Mandelson, even George Osborne were the sort of names that, according to The Guardian and the Tom Baldwin's book, were the sort of candidates that were being considered at the time. Is that right?
Those sound like the right names to me. I think that I don't recall there being much discussion ahead of the US presidential election. I think the Prime Minister wanted to rightly wait to see the outcome of that. I think if Kamala Harris had won that US presidential election, I don't think that Peter Mandelson would have necessarily been appointed, and he probably wouldn't have been. I think the Prime Minister started to seriously consider names after the US election.
Just so that we get the timeline right, you became head of office on the 6th of October.
Yes.
You really wanted Peter Mandelson to be the ambassador, didn't you?
I thought he was the right choice after the US presidential election. The reason why I thought he was the right choice is because Britain was exposed, the UK was exposed after Brexit. We left the European Union without any US trade deal. And for me, honestly, this was the top priority of the Prime Minister, was to get a US trade deal with the Americans. And I thought that based on Mandelson's experience as an EU Trade Commissioner, that made him the strongest candidate. But like everybody else, I made clear to the Prime Minister there was pros and cons, and there was risks. I don't think the Prime Minister would have chosen Mandelson if Kamala Harris had been elected President. I think he considered about who would be the right fit for the White House. And we procured him a short list of two strong candidates at that point.
I'll come on to that in a minute. But I mean, you wanted. I mean, it was more than that. It was personal as well, wasn't it? I mean, he was your mentor, particularly when you became Chief of Staff, because you had no experience of the weird and wonderful world of Whitehall, but obviously Peter Mandelson did. So didn't he become an indispensable and venerated confidant for you?
He was a confidant for me, but I don't beg pardon. But I didn't regard him as my mentor. I first had a conversation with Peter Mandelson in 2017. I don't think I really started to go to him for advice until about 2021, and I was 44 years of age then. So I didn't regard him at all as a mentor. I got advice from him, and it was useful. But I also had other people around who were perhaps a bit more shy with the media, who I sought to for advice. We brought in some extremely experienced people from the Blair administration. So Liz Lloyd came into our team, Jonathan Powell came into our team, and I would certainly ask both of those for advice about how things work as well. So I asked a range of people for advice and help. I don't regard Mandelson as ever being a mentor, but certainly as an advisor.
So, I mean, when the New Statesman says that Morgan wouldn't breathe without consulting Peter Mandelson first, that's not fair.
Yeah, you'll forgive me if I don't believe everything that's written about me in the papers, but I don't think that was true. He was somebody who I sought for advice, but both when I was campaign director and as Chief of Staff, I built a wide network of people who had done jobs similar to mine in the past, going back decades in the Labour Party.
And I will go into. I mean, I really wanted to just sort of start with. I mean, you began by working for Excalibur, didn't you? Which was run by Peter Mandelson. It was an attack and rebuttal unit, basically, in '97, and you worked on that. And one of the things was to also do work on Labour MPs who might be perceived as disloyal.
So, again, Chair, I'm glad that I can correct some of the records on this, because this is all a bit of a mythos here.
This comes from the Independent.
Yes. So I was an intern at the Labour Party in the 2001 general election. I was an intern. I was assigned to the attack and rebuttal team.
So you didn't work in '97 for Excalibur?
No, I did.
So 2001 was your first time.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
And my job. And I hate to dispel the myth to maybe some people from different political parties about what Excalibur was, but all I did was glue bits of newspaper to A4 paper and scan it into a machine. Mm-hmm. It was.
We've all done it.
Literally, that was as sophisticated as my job got. The team wasn't run by Mandelson. The team was run by Spencer Livermore, right. And it included lots of future Labour politicians and SPADs. I never met or spoke to Mandelson in that election, and I didn't even report into who is now Lord Livermore. It was much more junior people that I reported into. And
then what I wanted to ask you about was about the accounts in the I paper on the 4th of February 26 that Mandelson was helping to vet candidates, that he was given access to a secret Google spreadsheet of potential candidates, and that there was an off-the-books exercise. There's quite a lot of detail in the article about it, which tends to give at least an aura of authenticity to such reports.
Mandelson had nothing to do with the selection or the vetting of any of our parliamentary candidates. I don't know what Google Doc the I is referring to. I'm pretty sure it wasn't a party document. I don't think that we kept...
No, I think it's an off-the-books exercise. I think that's the point.
Well, but it had nothing to do with me or the party. I was in a senior role in the party at the time. We did everything on the books. There might have been other people compiling their own lists, but his role had no official impact on the selection of our candidates. Our vetting was done by a team inside HQ, and it was all to do with, it wasn't to do with political vetting, it was to do with inappropriate things they might have said or done prior to becoming candidates. And it was an NEC process to determine the suitability of potential parliamentary candidates. But Mandelson was not involved in the selection of our candidates.
And there was a strategy document called Labour for the Country, which was written, I believe, after the Hartlepool by-election defeat. And is it right that Peter Mandelson had a big input into that? I mean, it's your document, but he was involved in that too.
So I wrote that document in February 2021, ahead of the local elections to the Prime Minister, because I believe there was challenges the party was facing that it needed to address. And I think Hartlepool showed the scale of the political challenge we had if we wanted to win the next general election. And I certainly asked Mandelson for input into that document, but it was my document. The argument was mine. But I also sent it to half the shadow cabinet. I also sent it to other colleagues, all the senior staff, or most of the senior staff in Lotto at the time. I sent it to, and a document like that where I'm trying to gather my own thoughts, I might send it to 10, 15 people to say, can you give me a view? People from all across the party. But like I said earlier about Mandelson, most of the people who I would go to for advice were much shyer with the media. So you could quite easily put 15 contributors towards a document like that. But it was my document, and it was my argument that I wanted to make to the leader of the party at the time about the direction I thought we needed to take.
And after Angela Rayner resigned, and when there was the reshuffle on the 5th of September 2025, it's claimed that Peter Mandelson masterminded the reshuffle. In fact, there's a quote, this is not normal. He was US ambassador. Why was he masterminding the reshuffle? This is reported in the Daily Mail. Patrick Maguire says that on the day of the reshuffle, Peter Mandelson was in number 10 and wouldn't leave. And according to the New Statesman, just before his sacking, Mandelson had been in number 10 to advise on the first cabinet reshuffle.
Again, I'm very pleased I get the chance to correct the record on this. Mandelson was in the Cabinet Office and then understood came into number 10 on the day of the reshuffle, but he was not involved in the reshuffle. The reshuffle was extremely challenging because it was a bad day for our party, for the government. We had just lost the Deputy Prime Minister, and we needed to reorganise the government at pace, and the Prime Minister wanted to go ahead and do that. The text messages from Mandelson to me on the day, I believe, will be made available at a humble address. I can't remember precisely what he said, but he texted me his thoughts, and I have to say, on a reshuffle day, I get texted a lot of thoughts from a lot of people. The people who I would respond to and get back to would be cabinet members or other senior staff to ask them their views. I did not respond to any of Mandelson's texts. The text messages set out ideas of people that he thought should be in particular positions. None of his suggestions actually came out to be the case, so his ideas were not followed up. I don't mind getting ideas, but I didn't have a conversation with him about his ideas. He asked me to see me. I don't think I actually bumped into him. I may have done, but I definitely didn't discuss the reshuffle with him. The only text back from me to him is at the end of the day, where I said, look, I thought we did well considering the circumstances today, but I did not take him up on his offers of advice, and I did not act on any of the advice that he gave, and I did not ask him his views on any ministerial appointments.
And so are any of your text messages to Peter Mandelson, or not, going to be available in the humble address?
Yes.
And why is he texting you if you're both at number 10 on the same day?
Because he's not in the room.
And you didn't bump into him?
I might have bumped into him. I don't recall, but I certainly didn't ask him his views. And at the point that he texted me, so the way, and this was my only government reshuffle, there is a big gap between the Prime Minister taking a decision and then the media hearing about it, because we go through a number of processes, especially we have to go to the palace before it's announced publicly to ask the King's permission. So by the time we get to the afternoon, all of the work is done and you're making phone calls, and where the staff move on to is the next day. People text me. I don't like, and they're entitled to do so. I mean, it'll be backbench MPs, it'll be ministers, staff members, ex-staff members, journalists, and they will all text me their ideas. Everyone has an idea of how to make.
This is the American. This is the ambassador to the United States of America. He's in number 10 on the day of a reshuffle. I mean, it does look odd. At the very least, will you accept that?
It wasn't a planned reshuffle. If we had all hoped the day before that the former Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner would get cleared and that we wouldn't have had to do a reshuffle. That was our hope. Had Laurie Magnus gone another way, we wouldn't have had a reshuffle at all. So Mandelson wouldn't have been able to just arrive out of thin air. He happened to be in the Cabinet Office that day, and I don't know why he walked into number 10. But in the room which we were organising the reshuffle, there was the Prime Minister, there was the Chief Whip, I think, came in once he had been appointed new, or maybe he was there the next day, and then there was a handful of his senior staff. Mandelson was not in the room. The Prime Minister did not seek his advice, but as Chief of Staff on a reshuffle day, and it was true in opposition, I get a lot of text messages from people. I'll pay attention to the ones I get from cabinet members or from senior staff with their ideas, and most of the rest of them I just filter out, and at the end of the day I go back to them and say thanks for your input. I don't know why he did it, but people do it.
All right, well, let's go back to the appointment of him as ambassador. So there were a number of problems before he could become ambassador to the United States. I mean, the first being that he wanted to be Chancellor of Oxford and ambassador at the same time. So, I mean, he said on a podcast, the Times Pod, on the 12th of the 11th, 24, that he thought that he could do both jobs. Now, is it right that you asked for official advice on whether or not the role of ambassador to the United States could be part-time?
I don't recall, but I don't recall that I asked if it could be part-time.
So I'm relying in particular on an article in The Observer on the 4th of February 26. Morgan Mcweeny sought official advice over whether Peter Mandelson, who resigned from the Lords this week in disgrace, could be the UK ambassador to the US and Chancellor of the University of Oxford at the same time, sources have claimed.
I don't have any recollection of it.
And officials had to explain that being His Majesty's ambassador in Washington was a full-time job in Washington.
So I do remember thinking that at the time, that it was a full-time job. I understood that. So, like I said, at the time that he was doing that, I think that had Kamala Harris won the US presidential elections, I don't think he would have got the job. He was certainly lobbying for the job. He did, but I think that Oxford University shows he was also hedging, because he didn't know whether he was going to get it or didn't think he was going to get it. So he was also looking at other opportunities. He did say to me when he was saying to me that he was interested in the job, that he was also going for Oxford University. And my view to him was these are incompatible. I don't see how you could do both. So
if you're telling him that it's incompatible, then you wouldn't be asking for official advice on whether he could do it part-time?
I don't think I would have, but I can't say for certain if I...
Why wouldn't you remember something like that? I mean, it is pretty interesting.
I can't remember doing so. So I think you're right. I'd remember it if I would have, but I can't remember ever doing so.
Okay. I mean, one of the other problems was that Keir didn't like him. I mean, again, for the New Statesman, Keir doesn't even like him and never really has. He's not Keir's sort of person. And the Foreign Office definitely didn't like him, as far as we can tell. And then, of course, there's all the red flags. So all of these things are problems, getting in the way of Peter Mandelson becoming ambassador. But you still wanted him to be ambassador, right?
At the time, in Downing Street, there was conversations about who could be the best candidate, and and names were considered, and most people were making pros and cons argument. I have to say, I know that a lot of people now say they told the Prime Minister they were against it at the time. Everything I know about how the Prime Minister works is he will consult widely, he will take a lot of views on, and if everybody else was opposed to this appointment but me, he would not have made an appointment such as that. He does like to try to build consensus within his team and to get a wide range of views, and he doesn't just listen to one person on it. He certainly spoke to other ministers, other senior staff, and took his time reaching the decision that he reached.
Can I suggest something to you? That you wanted him to be ambassador, and so what you did was you bided your time for the first 6 weeks after your appointment of head of office, and then you went for it. I mean, as Jonathan Powell has said, it was weirdly rushed. I don't think it was rushed at all. What I would suggest is that it was part of a strategy. It's used in warfare, it's used in boxing, it's used in political campaigns. You go fast and you go hard and you confuse your opponents and you get what you want. You appreciate that. I mean, you are an expert in strategy. I mean, that is a strategy that is used sometimes.
That wasn't any strategy that I deployed. When I came in as Chief of Staff, we had big challenges in Downing Street. We had to reset Downing Street. We had a new PPS. One of my priorities was hiring more senior staff into the building because I thought we didn't have enough experience. We had a budget coming up, and most of my time at that time was completely immersed in the budget because I think, from my recollection, we were close to OBR deadlines. These were the kind of things that I was most concerned about, not who the ambassador was. When there wasn't detailed discussions that I remember ahead of the election because we were waiting to see who was going to be elected. So
Trump is elected on the 5th of November.
Yeah.
And what I would suggest is that on the 27th of November, when Mandelson has not been elected as Chancellor for Oxford, it was at that point that matters began. And that you had between the 27th of November and the 4th of December when the due diligence started. So it's very quickly after Mandelson is available as a candidate, we're doing due diligence. And we did due diligence not just for Peter Mandelson, but for another candidate at least as well. Is that right?
Yes.
And then we've got in between the 4th of December of due diligence being done and the 11th of December. And on the 11th of December, according to one of the box notes that we've seen, Mandelson's now the leading candidate. So what happened between the 4th of December and the 11th of December for Mandelson to become the lead candidate? What happened in early December?
So I would disagree a little bit with the sequence of events. Before consideration was given to who should be the political appointment, the first thing that had to happen was the Prime Minister himself had to decide did he want a political appointment or did he want to go ahead with a civil service appointment. I didn't write into that box note. I think
neither did the Prime Minister.
Well, I can't speak for what he wrote and didn't wrote. I can speak.
You're in charge of his office. There's no note at any stage of, as far as we understand it, unless something, we're about to get something, of the Prime Minister making a decision that he wanted to have a political appointment. There's no note of that, or the thought process in relation to that. And then there's no note, oh, actually, I've now thought about it, I want Peter Mandelson. There's no note from the Prime Minister on that either.
So if I take each one of these decisions separately, the first decision he had to make was did he want a political appointment or not? And I didn't write into that note that I thought that there should be a political appointment. He would have made his decision and he would have told his PPS what he wanted to do, and then his PPS said now we need to procure candidates. So he could have gone in a different direction at that point, and that would have been the end of it, and we'd have gone ahead with appointing a civil servant as ambassador. So he could have gone in a different direction. I didn't have any strong disagreements with anyone in number 10 that I can recall. Like everyone else, I could see there was pros and cons in the appointment, and I worried that it would go wrong. So I didn't try to push anything through. We procured two strong candidates for him. One was Mandelson and the other was George Osborne, the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, who I'd met as part of it. And my view was that we had, and I said to the Prime Minister, you have two appointable candidates. Others agreed that there was two appointable candidates. I can't recall anyone saying that Mandelson was not appointable.
So what happened in early December was that you went to the United States and you went with Jonathan Powell. And as far as I understand it, when you were in the United States, you were given a clear message from the Trump team that actually they weren't keen on Peter Mandelson and that they wanted to have Karen Pierce hanging on. So, I mean, did you tell the Prime Minister that? And is there a note of you telling the Prime Minister that?
So it's half right. So
This is Politico, the 20th of the 3rd, 26th.
They didn't talk to me about Mandelson. They made clear that Karen Pierce was doing a wonderful job and that they would be content with her remaining in post. But I did, as part of the process, talk to Foreign Office officials that I knew who also approached me directly as well. I spoke to people that I knew in the US system and I got a wide range of views. And quite a lot of views were coming back in support of Mandelson as a candidate. As I said, if the Prime Minister was hearing overwhelmingly against Mandelson, he might have made another decision. But he was getting a lot of views at the time. He was listening to people. He does listen to his senior staff. He does listen to his ministers before we reach a decision. So I think if it was just me arguing for it, I don't think he'd have made that appointment.
So we've got that, and we've also, of course, got all the stuff that's come out of the due diligence. And on the box note that I've been referring to on the 11th of the 12th, it says, Chief of Staff has discussed candidates with you, with the lead candidate being Peter Mandelson. So here he is, he's now lead candidate. So how did you manage to persuade the Prime Minister that he should be the lead candidate, given what you'd heard in America and given what was in the due diligence?
So what I'd heard in America is mixed views. There were some people I spoke to there that
you've told us that
said that Mandelson was a strong candidate. My view is that he was the lead candidate because of his experience as an EU Trade Commissioner and the political skills that I thought he could bring to the table.
No, because it's not your opinion that's important. It's the Chief of Staff has discussed candidates with you, with the lead candidate being Peter Mandelson. I mean, it is supposed to be the Prime Minister's decision, not your decision.
Yes. It's the Prime Minister's decision.
And the Chief of Staff has discussed Peter's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, which we will go through with you, but your Director of Communications is satisfied with his responses to questions about contact. Do you think it's appropriate when doing due diligence for you as a friend of Peter Mandelson to speak to the Prime Minister and for his responses to be measured by another friend of Peter Mandelson, Matthew Doyle? And for that information to be put before the Prime Minister as a basis upon which they can make a decision?
So I agree, and I think that when I look back on it, I certainly think it would have been much better if I'd asked Pet to ask those follow-up questions. I guess my thinking at the time was I'd put follow-up questions to him in writing, and that if a senior member of staff did that he would feel more obligated to give the truth and the full truth. I didn't feel that I got that back from him. But it wasn't my decision, it was the Prime Minister's decision, and he saw the DV as part of that decision.
And so between the 11th of December, when Mandelson's the lead candidate, and writing to the King and telling the King that, advising the King that this should be the candidate, what happens? Is there a decision made at that point that Peter Mandelson should be the ambassador, and where is the note to show that the decision was made and how the decision was made?
So I tried to get the times as best as I possibly could and dates, but you have to forgive me a bit because I don't have access to my number 10 diary or the Prime Minister's diary. So if I make a mistake, it's not intentional.
No, it's fine.
So I'll try to give you as best as I can. So I think three things worth saying. The Prime Minister will be talking to people at that time, saying, what do you think? Everyone will be giving him pros and cons. That's for sure. He will take a view based on a rounded view. Then the last meeting I recall where he said this is the direction I want to go in was with an independent Jonathan Powell and me and him. And then after that, and it might have been the same day or the day before, is when Nin Pandit wrote to Philip Barton to say the Prime Minister would like to make a political decision. So that was the last meeting that he had, and in that meeting he would have conducted that meeting the way he always does, which is to make sure everyone in the room has their view. And then
what date did you say this was? I've missed it.
This would have been either on the day or the day before, or a few days before Nin Pandit wrote officially to Philip Barton. So when Nin Pandit wrote to Philip Barton to say, can we begin the necessary arrangements and get Mandelson in place?
We're talking like 15th, 16th,
something
18th,
about that.
17th, 18th.
Yeah. So he would have had a meeting then. He would have said, right, what are we going to do here? Let me get your views. And then he'd have said, we're going to go with Mandelson.
Okay. During those 7 days, was there an agreement between the Prime Minister, between you, that what you should do is tell the King, tell the incoming President, announce the fanfare, but all of it always knowing that it would depend on his vetting? And would it be whether it was so during when this meeting was happening? Is it like, well, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, but obviously it's all dependent on vetting?
So I wasn't involved in any decisions about when to tell the King. I'm not aware of those processes or when the appropriate time to talk to the King or communicate with the King about all of this. I don't think that we discussed that at the time, and I know Simon Case's letter has come out subsequently. I didn't see Simon Case's letter at the time, or I don't recall seeing it. I think it was directly to the Prime Minister rather than to me.
But it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, you can't appoint somebody, let alone Peter Mandelson, without vetting him first.
So it didn't jump out as a problem to me at the time.
Even after the due diligence?
Even after the due diligence. And the reason why it didn't jump out to me, we had around about the same time, and again, I can't remember the dates, around about the same time, we made a political appointment for National Security Advisor in Jonathan Powell. And as far as I remember, we appointed him, and then we began the DV. I was appointed before I began the DV work, and that's what tends to happen. If he had then failed, then we wouldn't have sent him to DC. So it didn't occur to me to ask, because that's how I saw the practices being put in place. I think the Prime Minister is right in saying that shouldn't happen, and I think that he's now made a decision that won't happen again in the future. But as
a strategy man, don't you think it's a bit odd? Let's at least look at it this way. It's a bit odd to, essentially, what you've done is you've briefed the press, you've told the King, you've told the incoming President, he started being paid, he's got his pass, all of these sort of things have happened, and then you do the due diligence. So at that point, due diligence had said, no, sorry, really, too risky, can't do this, and he'd... Imagine the storm.
Sorry, no, due diligence had been done. DV.
Sorry.
DV.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
So, yeah, it would have been very embarrassing for us. But can I just play an alternative kind of scenario? So at the time, it didn't jump out to me as a problem. We appointed, as I said, I got appointed before I completed all my necessary work. Jonathan Powell got appointed too before the necessary work. If Mandelson's DV had been a problem, it would have been an embarrassment for us. It would have been a much bigger problem for him. But there's an alternative scenario, which is that we had, say, we're going to do DV before we talk to the palace or before we talk to the US administration. The chances of, unfortunately, the chances in government of there being a leak anyway would have been a problem. Either way, if your lead candidate fails DV, it is embarrassing, but it's far preferable to pull that candidate at that point than to go any further. If that happens to your candidate and your candidate blows up and you have to pull them out, that's what happens. It's embarrassing to us. It would have been worse for him. But at the time, nobody said to me, hang on, before you announce anything at all, make sure that we do this DV first. Of course, if somebody had, I wouldn't have questioned it. I would have, but
at the time, the agenda was that he is offered the job on the 20th, and he's supposed to be in Washington on the 20th of January. So that's just a month, and during that month, there's Christmas and there's New Year. I mean, all I'm suggesting is that this was part of a deliberate strategy to push this as fast as it could be in order to ensure that people could not raise any objections in the circumstances, because there simply wasn't time.
No, I don't agree with that at all. If there was problems with his DV, we'd have pulled them. If we'd been told that he couldn't get the necessary security clearance, I've no doubt the Prime Minister would have pulled them. I mean, in the event, the Foreign Office couldn't complete the work until after the inauguration, but the timetable was being set by the US political calendar. We wanted to wait until after the US presidential election to work out who the candidate should be, and we did want the candidate in place by the inauguration. But it wasn't a big deal that he wasn't in place by the inauguration. He was in place, I think it was about 2-3 weeks later.
So this is my last question. So do you think that when the chance came for you to give Peter Mandelson his last job, you stopped thinking about what was best for the government? Really, you stopped thinking about what was best for the country, and you just thought, I want to give this job, this great job, to one of my heroes, and it became an obsession. And it may be that the Prime Minister can be criticised for giving you this leeway, but it was a leeway that you abused. And you stopped thinking strategically, you closed your eyes to the risks, you didn't consult the necessary people, the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary. You railroaded this through as fast as you could before anyone could realise what had hit them.
I don't think that's true. I certainly spoke to the Foreign Secretary a number of times. Then Foreign Secretary. I have a very good relationship with the Deputy Prime Minister. I've known him for very, very many years, and I would certainly have spoken to him extensively at the time. I don't regard Mandelson as a hero. I think that's an exaggeration of the kind of relationship that I had with him. In every advice that I gave to the Prime Minister, hand on heart, I thought I was operating with a motive in a national interest. In politics, you over decades, you know a lot of people. I've had to, in 20 years in politics, I've had to fire friends from jobs. I've had to turn people down who were desperate for jobs, who were closer friends of mine than Mandelson, who really wanted jobs in Number 10, or people who thought they were going to be ministers, because I've always tried to operate in national interest. The amount of times I've had friends come and see me or phone me who were really angry at me because they didn't get the job that they wanted to get. That's what politics is. You have to try and always operate in the national interests. Of course, you know people, and then you make judgments that in this case turned out to be wrong and incorrectly. I completely accept that, but it was this was not some hero I was trying to get a job for. I thought that his skills as an EU Commissioner would help us to get the trade deal that I think the country needed, because we were very, very exposed after Brexit, and getting that trade deal right was very important. I thought he had the skills to do it. I made the wrong judgment. I completely accept that, but my motive was always in the national interest.
Afri, you want to do a follow-up, and then I'm going to Sir John. Is that right?
I had a few follow-ups.
Oh, well, I'll go to Sir John first, and then I'll go to you, if that's all right.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just be clear? The Prime Minister had decided that he wished to make a political appointment. Was it you who first said, Prime Minister, I've got the perfect candidate, Peter Mandelson?
I think the first person who put Mandelson's name forward was Mandelson.
Mm-hmm. Directly to the Prime Minister, I want the job? Or
I think he talked, I don't know if he spoke to him. I think he talked to a lot of people, making it clear that he was interested in the job, including, I'm sure, possibly even members of the press. But yeah, that's where that came from. I don't remember the Prime Minister asking me a view prior to the US election. I think, but I can't remember, but I think he was keeping his cards close to his chest, waiting to see the outcome of that election. And I think there would have been, for a Labour administration, a broader range of candidates available to him had the Democrats won that election.
You've set out why you think he was well qualified to do the job, but you've also known him for a very long time, and you will also be fully aware of the fact that he had twice had to resign from the cabinet, that he had business interests with China, that he had a close friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, and also that he was friends with Oleg Deripaska, who was a confidant of Vladimir Putin. Despite all those things, you still thought he was the right person for the job?
Well, to take each one of those in turn, he, after his last resignation, he had rebuilt a reasonable reputation for himself. He had gone as an EU commissioner, and as far as I was aware at the time of his appointment, and I don't know what will subsequently come of their own investigations, but he had a good reputation. He was seen to have done a good job as EU commissioner. Then he came back into British politics and served as a very senior member of Gordon Brown's premiership, Gordon Brown's government, and again at the time was well regarded as a senior minister in that department. So he had done these two big political jobs long after his last resignation. It's why I think that a lot of the media and a lot of other politicians at the time thought that this was the right appointment for the country. The nature of the relationship that I understood he had with Epstein was not a close friendship. How I understood it at the time was a passing acquaintance that he regretted having and that he apologised for. What has emerged since then was way worse than I had expected at the time. And it was when I saw the pictures, when I saw the Bloomberg questions in September 2025, I have to say it was like a knife through my soul. I did not expect that level of connection that he was talking about there. As for the other issues that you're raising, I thought business interests would be dealt with in the Foreign Office, so people look at things like conflict of interests. When we appointed SPADs who have business interests, Cabinet Office and PET would deal with that, so that wouldn't be something I would deal with as a Chief of Staff. And if there was any national security issues whatsoever, then my assumption on that was that would be dealt with by DV, and if there was any national security issues whatsoever, we would then be told if there was a problem, and then the Prime Minister could pull the appointment. So from what I knew at the time, I thought he had re-established himself as a credible political, senior political figure in Europe and in the Brown government. I did not was aware of the extent of the relationship that he had, and I thought that these other issues would be dealt with at other parts of the process.
Your discovery of the closeness of his relationship, you say, was a knife to the heart. But the box note says that you discussed with Peter Mandelson his relationship with Epstein, and that you then discovered as a result of that conversation, for instance, the fact that he stayed in the flat belonging to Jeffrey Epstein after Epstein had been convicted for paedophile offences.
That wasn't a discovery that I made.
Did you advise the Prime Minister of that?
No, that was in the DV form. That was from
DV.
So, no, beg pardon, you're right. A due diligence form from PET. I wrote to Mandelson after the DD to understand from him in writing what his position was on these issues. That email that I sent to Mandelson and his responses from that, the Met Police are using as part of their investigation. When I was in number 10, I was told that we couldn't share either the questions or the answers to those questions or the email itself with the media or as part of the humble address process until the police were finished with it, because they said it would interfere with their investigation. And so I've stuck to that since I've left Downing Street too.
But in your conversation with the Prime Minister about Peter Mandelson's relationship with Epstein, of Mandelson staying in Epstein's flat after the conviction, that was part of the conversation.
It's hard to answer that directly without saying what was in the contents of the emails. But my understanding at the time, I could maybe say about what my understanding was from hearing him talk about it and listening to his friends. My understanding at the time was that his relationship was a passing acquaintance that he knew through somebody else, that he's the way of he's describing it was that he realised that it was a mistake, he deeply regretted it, he broke it off many years before. He wasn't advocating for the guy or defending the guy in any way. And you take all of these things into consideration. What then emerged as the relationship in September last year was not the relationship that I was led to understand. It was very different.
Okay. Can I ask about the two notes that went to the Prime Minister from the private office about the appointment? In each case, they'd been released under the humble address process. They are completely blank other than the submission. There is no comment. The Prime Minister has not indicated any view. Now, I've worked in Downing Street, and box notes go up and they come back down with a comment. It may only be a tick, but there is something to indicate that the Prime Minister has taken a decision. In this case, there is nothing to indicate that the Prime Minister has taken a decision. Why not?
I can't answer the question. So the box notes usually come back into the civil service, and then I get informed what the decision is. He may, and sometimes he did do it verbally, but I can't answer why there wasn't anything in the box. So I would make submissions into the box the same as the other special advisors. They would be collated by his PPS, then they would go to the Prime Minister, and then the Prime Minister would send it back through the system. I didn't ask to see the box note. I would sometimes ask to see a box note if I was unsure what the decision was, or if I wanted to understand a bit more about his thinking. But generally speaking, I just took whatever the civil service said. But I don't know why he didn't tick. Maybe he spoke to his team.
Well, that's the alternative, that he didn't indicate in writing. He said, I would like to have a meeting to discuss this. But if such a meeting took place, there would be a record of it. And there is no record that has been released.
Again, I can't answer as to why that was. I wasn't the person who was keeping records. But in terms of his decisions, I would always make sure, in any decision, including any of this, that the PPS would always be present to be able to give reviews and to make sure decisions were properly recorded. But I wasn't the minute taker. I wasn't.
So how did you discover that the Prime Minister had decided to go ahead with Peter Mandelson?
I believe that, from my best recollection, that there was a meeting in mid-December, and he told us that that's what he wanted to do, and then Nin Pandit took his decision and passed that on to Philip Barton.
So a meeting took place, which led to the Private Secretary writing to say that that was the decision. Is there a record of that meeting?
I don't know. I don't have access to that information anymore.
It is your job to make sure that the minutes are taken of meetings.
No.
Not? No. So you're in charge of his office, but you're not in charge of there being any records made of any decisions made in the office?
No, the civil service will take responsibility for that side of things. My job was to make sure that he had the political input. But when I was in meetings, private secretaries would take notes. How those notes were recorded and circulated, I didn't ask around the detail of it. I just always assumed that they would be properly recorded and shared with the appropriate people.
Thank you. I just wanted to go back over some of the questions that the Chair had asked you and just ask some follow-ups and seek some clarification on some of those. You said that you were out in the States at the start of December prior to the appointment being made. When you were out there, in the conversations that you were having kind of offline, did anyone raise with you concerns that they had about Mandelson's business links with China?
No.
Okay. So thinking about the security vetting, we heard from Sir Philip Barton that he told us there was no contingency plan in place if security clearance wasn't granted to Peter Mandelson. Had you considered the possibility that clearance would be denied, and had you put any contingency plan in place?
I didn't have a contingency plan in place, but I was always aware that somebody could fail security vetting, was always aware that that was a possibility for any appointment that we made, yes.
Aware, but did you consider it? Did you kind of actively think this could happen in this case?
No, and if it had happened, we'd have withdrawn the ambassadorship. It would have been a political embarrassment, and then we'd have gone on with probably it's hard to guess. Karen Pearce, we'd have asked Karen Pearce, I think, to stay on probably, and then we'd have thought about what would be the next steps.
You clearly felt that Peter Mandelson was the right person for the job. You'd recommended him to the Prime Minister, although you have said that you believe the Prime Minister would have sought a wide range of opinions. Despite the fact that you ultimately resigned over your advice to the Prime Minister, would you say that he was the person in full knowledge of all of the information who made the decision to appoint Mandelson to that role?
He had all the knowledge that I had, but I don't know what other knowledge, and this is part of what this committee is looking at, what he should have otherwise have been told or not told, but he had all the knowledge that I had, yes. And
that he was the one who ultimately will have made the decision, not being persuaded or kind of doing what somebody else wanted him to do?
Yes, the Prime Minister takes the decision, yes.
Okay. So Sir Oliver Robbins, who obviously is the former Permanent Under-Secretary at the Foreign Office, he has now lost his job. And the PM said when he was asked that he didn't accept the explanation as to why he overruled the verdict of security vetters, and that's why he sacked him. Do you think somebody should be sacked for an error of judgment?
Sorry, if I could add one last thing to your previous question, if that's okay, which is that the Prime Minister was aware of everything that I was aware of, but the Prime Minister wasn't aware of enough, not because of advisors or civil servants, because Mandelson himself wasn't open enough with him. And that really is the big problem in all of this. And Mandelson said, this is everything, and defended himself on the truth. I don't think that he'd have come close to being appointed. So the Prime Minister did not have enough information because Mandelson did not share the necessary information with him. He had ample opportunity to do so and did not, and that is where, above all else, that is where this was let down. If he had been honest, like any other person, and the thing that I always thought about Mandelson was I thought he cared about his party and he loved his country, so I banked that he would at least be honest with his Prime Minister in such a post, and I think that's where really it was let down. So I don't think that the Prime Minister had all the necessary information to make the decision. Sorry, I've now forgot your next question. Beg your pardon.
That's okay. And thank you for your answer on that. I must say it appeared to me that there was a significant amount of information that had come forward in the due diligence, but I think there may be some questions from others on that, so I won't push on that now. My question was about Sir Oliver Robbins and the decision by the Prime Minister to sack him. And I wanted to know, given the reasoning that the Prime Minister gave in the Chamber, do you think that someone should be sacked for an error of judgment?
I can't really comment on what happened with Oliver Robbins. Sir Ollie, I had left Downing Street at the time, but I know how the Prime Minister works, and I think whatever decision he takes, he will always have been weighing up everything, including listening to people, but I can't really comment on that decision because I left Downing Street at the time.
So you think that he will have sought sufficient information, that he wouldn't have needed to carry out a fuller investigation, but perhaps suspending him rather than immediately sacking him from the job?
I can't say what he did and didn't do because it was after my time in Downing Street, so I'm not privy to any of this information. But how the Prime Minister works, yes, I think he'd have got the necessary information before reaching a conclusion.
And I just wanted to check, because you talked about the process that Jonathan Powell had gone through, as far as you understood, in terms of going through developed vetting before he took up the political appointment of being National Security Advisor. But I understand prior to that he was already a special envoy for the British Indian Ocean Territory. Would he not have had developed vetting in that role?
I don't know.
Okay. and just wanted to ask you a couple of final questions in relation to Matthew Doyle. We heard from Sir Oliver Robbins that the Prime Minister had inquired, as I'm sure you're aware, about a diplomatic role for Matthew Doyle. Why do you think that the Prime Minister didn't want David Lammy, who was the Foreign Secretary at the time, to be told about that request and those inquiries?
So it was what was happening at the time was it was clear that Matthew Doyle's time in government was coming to an end, and the Prime Minister wanted me as part of that to discuss with Matthew Doyle next steps, because these are difficult conversations, and the Prime Minister wanted me to convey to him that if he had wanted to stay in government, that he should consider doing so, because he had extensive experience in government. The private office asked what vacancies that Matthew Doyle might apply for. There was no suggestion at any point that he would be imposed in. If he had wanted to work in the Foreign Office, Matthew Doyle would have had to apply for any of those posts the same as anybody else. The reason why, I'm sure, but it wasn't my email, but the reason why I'm sure the private office said, please don't discuss this with anyone, including the Foreign Secretary, is because it was a delicate HR issue. Somebody's leaving their job. You don't want a lot of people knowing it. In the event, it wasn't something that was taken very seriously. It was as Matthew Doyle was leaving, and I'm having that conversation with him. People don't really engage in that conversation because it's a tough thing. And I'm saying, look, and I would have said to him, there are jobs coming up in the Foreign Office you might be interested in, such as these kind of things. But he didn't actually engage in that. He didn't seek to apply in any of that. He said he wasn't interested in any of that. He was in a senior job as Director of Communications. My understanding at the time was that it wasn't unprecedented for SPADs to apply for and get foreign policy jobs, such as Ed Llewellyn under the previous Conservative government, but it wasn't something that we talked about a great deal. He didn't apply for any jobs, but for reassurance, he would have had to apply the same as anyone else. And had he said he wanted to apply, absolutely at that point the Foreign Secretary would have been involved in that conversation. But the reason why the private office didn't want it shared around was because it was a sensitive issue for exiting somebody from their job.
If your answer is that he would have to apply in answer to an advert, like anyone else, like Equal Opportunities policy says, then why does anybody need to ring anybody else up?
Well, because the Prime Minister wanted to say to Matthew Doyle, look, you've done a good job, but we have to change the direction that we're going in comms. There's other jobs coming up. It was more about a kind of softer landing. There was no suggestion in any conversation that anyone had with me that there was a desire to impose him into any job. All I said to him when he was leaving was, look, there's these jobs coming up, would you be interested in them? But he wasn't. So that was the end of the conversation. And the only reason to keep the circle of people knowing limited was because there was a HR issue, and we just don't want to have those wider discussions. We want to have those discussions with as few as people as possible. But I don't think this was a big conversation with anyone. I think it was all the Prime Minister saying, look, can you have this with him? Well, he wanted to. I mean, they are difficult conversations. He wanted Matthew Doyle to be able to land on his feet somewhere, and he wanted to encourage him to apply for the next thing. And then part of that is telling to people, look, there is time to move on, but there are other opportunities out there.
So, I mean, you say it wasn't a big conversation, but obviously it went to the head of the diplomatic service, so that's quite a senior conversation to be having. You, in your answer, you say that you believe it was not told to David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary at the time, because it was a sensitive HR issue. Are you aware of any other discussions between Number 10 and the Foreign Office, the Permanent Under-Secretary, whether it was Sir Oliver Robbins or Sir Philip Barton, in which the Prime Minister on Number 10 asked for the Foreign Secretary not to be involved in the discussion?
No.
And would you say, how involved would you say that the Foreign Secretary was at the time in that decision to appoint Mandelson as the ambassador?
He certainly would have had several conversations with the Prime Minister. I had conversations with him. I don't know who else he had conversations with.
And he was fine about it, wasn't he?
Nobody was fine about it. Everyone could see that there was risks, and like everybody else, he would have flagged that there are risks. And I don't want to share with the committee what conclusions people came to, because I think it's for other people to say.
You were there. I mean, you were there. There's no notes, you know. So we're just trying to understand how these decisions are made. They've got the Foreign Secretary. Here he is at a meeting. We're discussing whether or not Britain should send Peter Mandelson as ambassador to Washington. I don't see what's wrong with you telling us whether the Prime Minister, whether the Foreign Secretary thought it was a good idea or not.
Because I can't remember precisely what people said, and like.
Don't tell us word for word. Just
okay.
Like, did he say, okay, yes, let's do it? Or did he say, actually, I've got reservations?
Like everybody else, he could see that there was cons and risks, and like everybody else, he would have seen. I had reservations too. Like everybody else, he would have had reservations. He'd have discussed them iteratively with the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister would have taken the Foreign Secretary's views very seriously. He is somebody who he's close to politically. He obviously appointed him afterwards as Deputy Prime Minister in that reshuffle you were asking about earlier. So he was somebody who he was the then Foreign Secretary. I'm getting the terms right. The current Deputy Prime Minister is somebody who the Prime Minister is close to. Would have got his views. He would have also got his views of senior staff and other ministers. And the Prime Minister would not have dismissed any of those people's views, and would have taken them in the round before making a final decision.
Okay, let me try one more time.
Sorry.
Did the Foreign Secretary say, I think this is a bad idea?
Not to me.
Okay. Edward.
I just wanted to go back quickly to your presentation of the conversation with Matthew Doyle, that in fact, if there were upcoming posts, ambassadorial posts in the Foreign Office, then he should consider applying for them. Can you see how, if you were Matthew Doyle and you'd just seen the Prime Minister ram Peter Mandelson down the throat of the FCDO despite all of the obvious problems, that might feel like a job offer, even if it was how you characterised it? You surely would be sitting there going, that seems like a pretty locked-on job if I wanted.
I don't think that the Prime Minister conducted himself in the way that you were suggesting. He was told by the Cabinet Secretary that he was allowed to make a political appointment, and he made his political decision about who he thought the candidate should be. It's then for the machine to implement the Prime Minister's decision. Sorry, and certainly not the way I would have put it to Matthew Doyle when he was leaving. I would not have said, and I would not have needed to say it. This was
no, you wouldn't have, because you would have been sitting there going, well, if I want the job, I'm definitely going to get it, because the Prime Minister didn't get Peter Mandelson one.
Certainly not. No. I certainly don't agree with that. This was about a duty of care to somebody who was leaving, and saying to them there are other opportunities out there. In the end, he didn't ask for any follow-up on that, but I would not have said to him, we're going to move you from this to this, or whatever job you want is yours. I certainly would not have said that to him, and it was the same when other people were leaving too. You would say to him, look, there might be other opportunities in the future. But
have you heard the phrase "jobs for the boys"? I mean, this is so far from any equal opportunities policies that I've ever heard of. I mean, don't you think this is a little odd or shameful?
Well, the same was true if we had to exit senior women from the team as well. We'd have said to them, if you want to stay in government, and some did. But Matthew Doyle. Matthew Doyle would have had. I don't want to.
I'm just saying, you know, talking about senior women. I mean, what job was she given, for example?
Tsar of the Regent.
So, Sue Gray's now in the House of Lords, but this isn't about. He wasn't promised a job, and had he applied for the job, then the Foreign Office would have considered his application the same as anyone else, and the equalities and all of the other necessary procedures would have had to follow in any direction. So he was...
Sorry, Mr. Mcweeny, that is not what Sir Ollie Robbins told us. Sir Ollie Robbins told us that Matthew Doyle's name was another one that was floated as a political appointee, which, given that when the Prime Minister politically appointed Mandelson, it was a lock, it would be fair to assume, if you are Matthew Doyle, that effectively the similar guarantee was being made to him.
I wasn't asked to... I didn't send that email to him. It was the opposite, though, of Jobs for Boys. He was losing his job. And all I said to him was there might be other opportunities. It was never followed up. And I was not told by anybody, not by the Prime Minister or the private office, you need to go and promise him a job. It was just a simple duty of care conversation. You're leaving the job. There are other opportunities in the future. Do you want to explore them? And it was no, and that was the end of the conversation.
Epstein.
Thank you, Chair. I want to take us back to a couple of questions that the Chair asked earlier in relation to Matthew Doyle. So on the 11th of December, the note to the Prime Minister, Director of Communications is recorded as saying that he was satisfied with his responses to questions about contact with Epstein. Matthew Doyle was the Director of Communications. Did you trust his judgment, given what we know about Matthew Doyle?
Trust his judgment, given what we know, beg your pardon.
Do you trust Matthew Doyle's judgment in relation to that particular, that he was satisfied with his responses to questions in relation to his contact, Mandelson's contact with Epstein?
So Matthew Doyle submitted his view into the Prime Minister, and it would be for the Prime Minister to decide whether he took that view on board or decided not to take the view on board. In terms of what I did, was I gave the answers, ran through the answers with the Prime Minister, but I didn't put a lot of weight on my own judgment on what Matthew Doyle thought at the time.
Okay, so there was a fact-finding call between the General Counsel to the Prime Minister and Matthew Doyle, where he's reflecting back on some of the conversations there. It's noted there that Lord Mandelson is a personal friend of Matthew Doyle, and that he had a number of conversations with yourself, many of which were one-to-one, and there was quite a lot of back and forth, which resulted in 3 specific questions. What were those 3 specific questions?
So they were all questions that came from wanting clarification around the due diligence report, and on the point of who should have been asking him those questions. It's my view now that we should have asked PET to ask those questions.
What were the themes of those 3 questions?
So they were questions in relation to the due diligence reports, but they are questions that the police have now got that email, and so does the government, and so does Number 10. But they've asked for, at the time I was in Number 10, I was told that the police did not want these questions or their answers released. They will be released as part of the humble address process, but when the police are finished with it. So until then, I don't feel that I can say what the questions were.
Okay, and do you think that given the scale of the appointment that 3 questions were sufficient enough to interrogate Mandelson?
I think if somebody is being honest with you, then the questions would have been sufficient. If somebody's hiding, then whether you ask 3 or 5, if they're deliberately hiding something, or however many questions it might have been, then I'm not sure you got to the bottom of it. For purposes of appearances, and public appearances are important in this, I wish and I regret that I didn't ask PET to carry out those questions, but I'm not sure that they'd have got better answers given how he was choosing to answer these questions. I'm not sure they'd have got better answers at all. However, my hope at the time, was that, my thinking at the time at least was that I'll ask him these questions and he should answer them honestly. If he doesn't answer them honestly, I don't have investigatory powers, and neither would PET. But there was 2 other mechanisms that I thought might catch a problem. One was he had been such a public figure for so long, and had media scrutiny, actually worked for the media, that if there was anything where he had said something to me that the media later uncovered, then there would be gaps. I also thought that DV would expose if there was any further risks. So I thought those were the other next steps where there was some safeguards in place. But if somebody isn't fully truthful about the questions they answer, then if there was been a different person asking it, or if they'd asked more questions, I'm not sure. It's hard to tell. We don't know. But with hindsight, I wish that I'd asked Pet to ask those questions.
Okay, did you put those questions in writing?
Yeah.
Is your evidence that you put those questions in writing because you thought Mandelson was more obligated to tell the truth if he had to write it down?
Yeah, and I had a record as well.
So does that mean that you advised the Prime Minister that you didn't think that Mandelson had told you the full truth about Epstein?
No, I didn't say that to him.
Or did you say, that the Prime Minister thought, well, if there's a serious problem, the DV will pick it up?
No, I didn't say there's a serious problem. The DV will pick it up. No.
No, but I mean, either you thought that Mandelson was lying to you about Epstein, and presumably you told the Prime Minister that, or you thought, well, or the Prime Minister thought, well, okay, he's lied, but let's make sure, but the DV will pick it up, so that'll cover us at that point.
No, I thought he had told the truth. I thought if he had written to me and set it out the way he did, that he'd have told the truth. That was a mistake.
Right, so he'd lied before and then he told the truth when he wrote it.
I thought he I didn't think he had lied. I thought he had told the truth, and I thought, and that was the basis of which I thought we were going ahead. But I also thought, if I was wrong, if he had been lying, I thought he told the truth, and that's why I thought we should proceed. But I thought if I was wrong, and he had been lying, that might be picked up at DV.
And whatever he wrote, he essentially assured you that that any allegations about him staying at Epstein's house once Epstein was in jail was all fine.
Again, I don't think I can share the contents of the emails and the questions and his answers, but when he wrote back to me, I assumed wrongly that he was telling me the truth.
Okay, so going on to another fact-finding call, this time with Jonathan Powell. He's recorded as saying that he raised concerns directly with yourself in relation to the reputation of Mandelson. You responded back to him saying that the issues had been addressed. What issues had been addressed?
I don't recall that conversation. Like everyone else, Jonathan Powell was saying that there was pros and cons, but I don't recall that conversation.
So you don't recall any issues being addressed? No. Okay. So I'll take us now to areas of conflict of interest in the due diligence checklist. So you said earlier that nothing jumped out at the due diligence stage and that you weren't aware of the extent of the problem. Did you look at the due diligence checklist in detail that was provided?
So things jumped out as a problem, but nothing jumped out as me a problem in the regards that we hadn't done the DV yet. So I assumed the DV process would happen following the Prime Minister's decision. It didn't jump out at me that it was public, that's who the Prime Minister's preferred candidate was before we did the DV. On regards conflict of interests, my assumption was that would be picked up with the Foreign Office when he was being employed, because when we had SPADs appointed who had business interests, that would be picked up by the Cabinet Office and not dealt with at a political level.
Okay, so in the due diligence checklist under professional financial relationships, it says that the retained role and interest in Global Counsel would have to cease, come to an end. Did you make sure that that took place, or at any point did you question that?
I left all that to the Foreign Office because that's not my skill set or expertise. I wouldn't know how to even manage that.
Okay, and then in relation to reputational risks, so again, earlier you referenced that nothing jumped out at the due diligence stage. Did you have the chance to read the 2019 report commissioned by JP Morgan?
Sorry, just again, it did jump out at me this was a problem. What didn't jump out as a problem was that we had yet to do DV. So I can't recall reading it, no, but I recall thinking this is a problem and we need to ask some follow-up questions.
Okay, so questions were asked in relation to the JP Morgan report, but not enough to cause serious concern.
It wasn't the volume of questions. I don't think that was a problem. It was the nature of the answers and the lack of honesty.
Have you read the emails between Mandelson and Epstein in the JP Morgan report?
I can't recall reading them.
Okay, I will reference some of them where Epstein says, was PT helpful? These are all in the public domain and were from 2019. Was PT helpful in relation to the intention to sell a government asset? Epstein emailing Mandelson saying, I like to see my suggestions come to fruition. In 2010, Mandelson shares the guest list for an event he's speaking at in Shanghai. Another email from 2010, Mandelson emails about Russian businesses. Were none of these emails brought to your attention as a serious red flag?
No.
Okay. So if these were not part of the due diligence process, did the Prime Minister have any understanding of the depth of concern that was raised in the report, the JP Morgan report?
So he read the due diligence file. I don't know precisely what his overall views on it were.
So nobody thought to bring it to the Prime Minister as well, the content of the report?
Other than what I think he saw, I'm not
Do you think that was a failing of your role as the Chief of Staff to bring it to the Prime Minister?
I think that I would have expected due diligence to produce all the content that was available out there, and not for me to run a parallel process to look for other due diligence. So I didn't add my own further investigation to it.
It was all in the public domain, so this is everything that the general public would have known. So this was not serious enough to require you to, first of all, look into the evidence, and secondly, report it to the Prime Minister.
I didn't carry out any further investigations, and I think, looking back on it, I think that the DD process was surprisingly inadequate to me. We had so when we came in to government, we had introduced adding DD to appointments of SPADs, special advisors, which wasn't there before. We started to use other SPADs to do it because the process, I think, wasn't good enough, generally speaking, and this report, I think, was insufficient. And should I have asked further questions of the report compiling team, then I think that's fair. I think I should have.
And final question from me. You said it was wrong to appoint Mandelson. Why is it wrong now, but it was right back then?
I think the reason why I thought it was right then was because of his experience as an EU Commissioner. I think what came out in September last year with the Bloomberg emails, I think the pictures and later revelations from the Epstein files shows that the nature of the relationship that he had meant he was unfit for the job.
Answer that you gave, because I do feel as though you've contradicted it. I mean, I've got a note now. So my thinking at the time was that I'd put follow-up questions to him in writing, and that if a senior member of staff did that he would feel more obligated to give the truth and the full truth. I didn't feel that I got that back from him. But it wasn't my decision. It was the Prime Minister's decision. And he saw the DV as part of that decision.
Sorry, let me correct myself. In September, I realised I didn't get the truth back from him. At the time, I thought I got the truth back from him. When I saw the emails and the pictures that came out and that were published from the Epstein files in September last year, that's when it really dawned on me that I did not get the full truth from him then. At the time, I thought he was telling the truth. If I didn't think he was telling the truth, I would have said, this guy is not telling me the truth, but I did think he was telling the truth, and that was wrong.
So, I didn't feel that I got that back from him, but it wasn't my decision, it was the Prime Minister's. You didn't mean any of that?
No, I didn't feel that I got the truth back from him in September last year. Sorry, I might have mumbled my words. I got the answers back from him. I thought that he was telling the truth. When I gave that to the Prime Minister, I did so on the basis that Mandelson had answered truthfully. That was in January, or December, beg your pardon. And in September last year, it became clear to me that he hadn't told the truth.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies if we're going over the same point here, but for the point of clarity, the due diligence report is produced by the Cabinet Office. You received that. Did the Prime Minister receive the full unredacted due diligence report, or did you summarise it, or did you brief him orally? What did the Prime Minister receive?
We received the full report.
You received the full report. And did you discuss the contents of the report with him?
Yes, I believe so, yeah.
Okay. And during that conversation happened at a point at which he had read the report, or there's a difference between receiving the report and reading it, I guess?
Yes, he would have read the report. He read all these papers.
Okay. Did he raise any reservations with you during that discussion?
I can't remember particularly which ones, if he did.
You wrote some clarification emails to Peter Mandelson, received those replies. Did those responses go to the Prime Minister?
Yes.
And did you discuss those responses with him?
Yes, we would have discussed those responses with him, and again, he would have considered them in a round.
Okay. So he didn't. Did he express any reservations at that point about the appointment of Peter Mandelson?
I can't remember what he said.
You've talked about there being pros and cons to the appointment of Peter Mandelson. When you said you spoke to Jonathan Powell, you said that he raised pros and cons. When you spoke to David Lammy, he raised pros and cons. I'm just wondering, outside of Peter Mandelson himself, is there anyone who wasn't raising any cons? Is there any out-and-out advocates for Peter?
No, but the same is true of quite a lot of appointments.
What, the
people have cons?
Okay. I guess I'm going back to what you said earlier, which is that the Prime Minister talks to lots of people before coming to the decision himself, but so far everyone you've listed seems to be on the fence as to whether or not Peter Mandelson was a good appointment or worth the risk. I'm just wondering how you get to the point where you've got two candidates, and this is not to speak to the appropriateness of George Osborne in any way, shape or form, but you've got two candidates, one of whom absolutely everyone you speak to says, well, it's a coin toss on that one. So how does that end up being the candidate?
So what I haven't said is what each individual person conclusion they came to, in part because I don't remember precisely and I don't want to unfairly represent anyone else's views. Not only would people have said, I think there are pros and cons, but they'd have said, and this is what I think we should do. Mm-hmm. And the Prime Minister would have got a range of views, and he would have concluded based on the range of views which way he's going to go to. He would not have put up with people saying on the one hand and then on the other, so I'm going to sit on the fence. He'd have said, well, what's your view? What do you think we should do? And then he'd have got all those views and reached a decision. In the aftermath, I understand why people are mostly focusing on the cons they'd have raised, but I can tell you that there is no way the Prime Minister would just accept one person's view as being pro a candidate if everyone else had been against it. I think
even if it had been you.
Even if it had been me, yeah, absolutely, yeah. The Prime Minister has his own mind. He reaches his own decisions. Sometimes he takes advice from me and will go with it, and sometimes when I was there, he didn't. And all these other people that you're talking about are close confidants to the Prime Minister, people who he's judgment, who he trusts and respects. People like Jonathan Powell, people like David Lammy, these are senior staff that he has in number 10. These are people who he takes very, very seriously. And sometimes as an advisor, you make advice and the Prime Minister goes with you. And that's what happened this time, and I'm taking responsibility for that advice. There was other times where I'd say, I think we should go in this direction. And the Prime Minister would say, no, I've got a different view, I've got a different candidate, or I don't like your candidate, and he goes in a different direction. In a situation where I want to go in one direction and senior cabinet members want to go in another direction, he's more likely to weight it with those cabinet members. So it depends on each individual situation. But Keir Starmer's not somebody who just takes one person's view before going with it. He is a considerate Prime Minister. He takes on views. He respects the views of people like the current Deputy Prime Minister, the current National Security Advisor, and his senior staff. And he would have taken those views very, very seriously.
Yeah, thanks, Chair.
Richard.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Mcweeny, for the committee today. I'd like to ask a few questions about communication between Number 10 and the Foreign Office. It was rumoured last autumn, that the communication between yourself and Sir Ollie Robbins was assertive, emphatic, sweary even, and you've denied that. How did you communicate to the FCDO the desire from Number 10 to speed up the approval of Mandelson's developed vetting?
Thank you, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to answer this. I'm firstly very, very grateful to Sir Philip Barton for what he said about this swearing rumour. It is something that has caused me a great deal of stress for a number of months. I don't know why people do this in politics, put around untrue rumours. They phone lots of journalists. Those journalists then phone lots of politicians. That's how rumours get around. It is very, very corrosive. It's damaging for people's reputation, and a lot of people in Number 10 get that, and I think it's unfair for staff who can't speak for themselves. I'm grateful as well to the journalists, the vast majority of whom never covered that story because it wasn't true, and I'm so glad that Sir Philip Barton said today that I did not phone him, that he has no recollection of me swearing at him, and I have no recollection of swearing at him either. I denied it when I was repeatedly asked about it by journalists. Most journalists did not touch the story and showed a lot of integrity on that, and I think it's one of the most corrosive things that happens in politics. So I'm glad I got the chance to set the record straight. I did not swear at Sir Philip Barton. I did not swear at Sir Ollie Robbins either. And in his testimony, he said that I didn't call him, I didn't text him, I didn't email him. So I was not talking to Sir Ollie Robbins about this issue. And I have to say that because of what's happened, we're rightly all focusing on precisely what happened with this appointment. But I can tell you, in January 2025, this wasn't one of my most important issues. There was far more serious issues affecting the government and the country in January 2025 than the start date of an ambassador. That wasn't my priority at all. That wasn't the issue that kept me awake at night. And if I was talking to officials at all generally at that level, it wouldn't have been about this issue. What happens, I think it's important that we unpack this idea of pressure, because there's been a lot of conversation about it. There is pressure in government every day, and most of that pressure comes from within inside you. Every civil servant, minister and SPAD I worked with woke up every morning feeling pressure to make the country better, wanting to move faster. The challenges the country face are great. That's where the pressure comes from, and rightly so. And Number 10's job in all of this is to make sure that the Prime Minister's decisions are acted quickly. But there is a real difference between asking people to act at pace and asking people to lower standards. And we never did that. We never asked people to skip steps at any part of the process. I didn't speak to, I don't think I spoke to Ollie Robbins about the appointment or the start date. I think I had a conversation, at least one, maybe two, with Philip Barton, but it was on a wider Zoom call. As he said, it wasn't on a phone call, but it was all about, can we do this at pace, not can we do anything improper.
And I mean, accepting the point that your communication wasn't directly with Sir Ollie, we know from Sir Ollie's testimony that there was communication from Number 10 to the Foreign Office, even if it didn't include you both individually. And so who in Number 10 was applying this pressure that Sir Ollie described?
So the private office of Number 10 chased the appropriate department every day on decisions that the Prime Minister would have made. There would have been occasions where I'd have asked, where are we with this decision? But as a priority of Number 10 of our daily meetings, the start date of Mandelson was not something that was regularly on the agenda. It would have been sometimes. So what happens is the Prime Minister takes a decision, and then the private office will chase another private office. If it's a political issue, if there's a political barrier, then SPADs will chase SPADs, or occasionally it might elevate to talking to ministers about what's going on in the department. But in this case, the number 10 private office would have chased the Foreign Office private office to see when this was happening. But none of the chasing would have been asking to skip steps, and I think that's very important because we're talking about national security. And every single person that I worked with in number 10 took national security very, very seriously. Everyone there knew what was at stake with national security and would not have played hard and fast with national security.
I just want to repeat back to you a couple of lines from Sir Ollie's testimony to this committee last week. He said, "My strong sense that there was an atmosphere of pressure and a certain dismissiveness about this DV process." And separately he said, "Throughout January, honestly, my office and the Foreign Secretary's office were under constant pressure." Do you refute that?
Like I said, I'd like to unpack the two elements of pressure here. We're under pressure to try and get decisions implemented. Our preference in number 10 was that Mandelson was in post for the inauguration. And we wanted him in post for the inauguration because there was an opportunity to get to meet the new incoming administration and other key figures in DC. In the event, the Foreign Office were unable to get him in post by then. He didn't start for 3 weeks later. So they couldn't deliver on that timetable, and it wasn't the end of the world for us. It wasn't a big deal. Our preference was the 20th of January. I believe he started in the 10th of February, sometime around then, 2 or 3 weeks later. So we didn't get the timetable that we wanted, but we wanted it to be done quickly. But I worry that this conversation that's happening, and it's right that it's happening because people need to understand what's happening, is bringing two things together that are completely separate. Yes, we wanted it done quickly, but at no point, at any point in number 10, did I witness anyone being dismissive about DV or national security.
That pressure around the timeline may have been misinterpreted as pressure for an outcome. So how would you reconcile the pressure that Sir Ollie described last week with the Prime Minister having stated at Prime Minister's questions last week that no pressure existed whatsoever in relation to this case?
The Prime Minister was saying there was no question, there was no pressure in relation to vetting. I don't think I ever had a conversation with a senior official about anyone's vetting. As Ian Collard said in his letter, he didn't think it had any impact on the outcome of their vetting. I think there's a world of a difference between saying we want to go quicker and we want to be reckless. There's a world of a difference from saying to a taxi driver, I'm late for a plane, to can you break all the red lights and go speeding. There's a world of a difference between those things. One is proper, we want things done quickly. The people of this country should want number 10 to say we want things done quickly. The other one is wholly improper. We want steps to be skipped.
I mean, you're talking about red lights. I mean, the pressure put on civil servants potentially meant that they missed 2 red lights on the form on page 10, the summary form, which said that they recommended that he didn't pass DV. I mean, according to Ollie Robbins, he didn't see it. According to Ian Collard, he didn't see it. So they both of them missed those red lights. And is it not because of pressure being put on them?
That's not what either the testimony from Ollie Robbins or from Ian Collard's letter said. My understanding was he said that he does not assess that pressure affected the outcome. I thought that's what he said.
But neither of them can talk. You're the one who raised red lights and cab drivers. Both of them missed the red lights. Both of them missed the green, orange, red. Neither of them can tell us that they saw those two things. It seems to me to be fairly clear evidence that the DV was making a fairly strong recommendation. And yet we hear both of them seem to think that it was a borderline case leaning towards not.
Crawley made his assessment and would have carried out the processes the way he saw fit. I can't comment on how the DV process worked. I'm only learning about the DV process in real time, watching these interviews and watching this committee's work. What I can say is that nobody in number 10 ever thought it would be acceptable to skip steps. Yes, we want to move quickly, but that does not and should never involve making decisions that put national security at risk. I haven't seen anything in Sir Ollie's testimony or Ian Collard's letter that suggests that they did not follow proper procedures. They're saying they did follow proper procedures. Why they missed them, I think, needs to be part of how we draw the lessons from this. But they're not saying that they did anything improper, and nobody's saying they were asked to do anything improper as well. You've heard from Sir Philip Barton, you've had the letter from Ian Collard and Sir Ollie Robbins and Cat Little, and these are all like brilliant people. None of them said they would be asked to do anything improper. And from everybody I know in Downing Street, private office people would not ask if other private offices to do anything proper. These are serious people who worry about national security.
We've got Fleur next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming in to see us today. I'm going to take you back to the very beginning of the process. It's famous that Peter Mandelson hosted dinners with political people at his house and in restaurants. It's widely reported. Did you attend any of those dinners in 2024 or up to your departure in 2025 at his house or in restaurants?
I didn't hear that last bit.
Did you attend any of Peter Mandelson's kind of private dinners that he hosted in his house or in restaurants? He held monthly dinners for political people. It's just reported. I haven't been to any of these. I don't think anyone here has, but have you been to any of those dinners?
So I've been to 2 dinners in his house. One was, I think they were both in 2024 with a wider range of people. I think 2, yeah. Maybe 1 lunch and 1 dinner, I think. In a restaurant in the whole 4 years I knew him. I think twice as well. I went for dinner with him.
Thank you. And we're trying to get to the bottom of who really proposed Mandelson's appointment. So you have said that you're sorry for your part in it, but also that before you started in post after the election, there were some access talks. You referred to access talks in January 2024, which you weren't party to, but which happened. You know that Peter Mandelson's name came up. Was it a done deal?
Oh, sorry, no. I didn't say whose name had come up.
Okay.
So I spoke to Simon Case, trying to piece together what happened, and he said, I said to him, I recall there being a sense that we always seem to have wanted a political appointment. I said, when did you first remember this? And he said January, February 2024, that Simon Case asked the Prime Minister's access team.
Right, well, after an hour and 40-odd minutes of listening to Morgan Mcweeny, the Prime Minister's former Chief of Staff, giving evidence to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, a lot of questions, a lot of very interesting comments. Obviously, Ian Collins is coming up in about 15 minutes' time, but I want to have a little bit of a chance after watching that and listening to all of that. And I have to say, you certainly have shown an interest. We can see the numbers are sky high in terms of watching that. But Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, is joining me. Of course, Julia Hartley-Brewer. I am not Emily Thornberry. Easy mistake to make, I understand. But we've been watching and listening to all of that, and I have to say, it has been quite extraordinary evidence we've heard. The main thing that I think my main takeaway from all of that, with all the quotes and all the different things that have been queried by all the different MPs asking questions, is how absolutely rubbish the procedure was for appointing the most senior diplomat we were going to have, who was going to have access to the extraordinary level of defence, security and economic briefings and our top state secrets. I mean, literally, this man was going to know everything going on. And access to American state secrets as well. And yet it was just an incredibly casual attitude to the vetting process. There was an interesting statement from Morgan Mcweeny at the very beginning. He made a little statement saying he had made a serious error of judgment in recommending Lord Mandelson as ambassador to the US. He says the appointment was a serious error of judgment. I advised the Prime Minister in support of that appointment and I was wrong to do so. But he said that judgment was a mistake. What I did not do was oversee national security vetting, though ask officials to ignore procedures, request that steps should be skipped or communicate implicitly or explicitly that checks should be cleared at all costs. I would never have considered that acceptable. The trouble is, it's very clear, although there was a bit of confusion about whether or not he had thought at the time that he'd been lied to by Mandelson, that actually they didn't do the proper procedures, and they had plenty of evidence and plenty of reason to believe that Mandelson was not telling them the truth when there were red flags, and they ignored them and they appointed him anyway. What do you make of his evidence, Tom?
Well, there's so much to unpack there, isn't there? I think on this particular claim that essentially we were lied to, or that...
And how could we have known that?
Yeah, that's what he seems to boil his argument down to, is that Peter Mandelson misled him and that the due diligence which was done internally in the Cabinet Office was insufficient in terms of what was then revealed almost a year later after the appointment in September. There's these Bloomberg emails which were referred to there, which made clear that Mandelson was standing by Epstein even after he was brought up on those charges in 2008.
This is the big revelations about the Epstein files that they exposed.
Soliciting sex from a child. So this was, and that was something that the government felt they'd been misled about. That doesn't wash for a couple of reasons, one of which is that there was plenty that was already in the public domain, which was pretty, if not incriminating directly, shall we say, would cast doubt on whether or not Mandelson was the sort of person who should have been appointed. And the other point is that in relation to that due diligence, there will still have been plenty in there which would have led to more scepticism. So this idea that, well, we just took him for granted, and even if they did think, oh, this Mandelson character seems on the up and up to me, even that's a failure of judgment.
Yeah, I mean,
he's the slipperiest character in politics for some time. Nicknamed the Prince of Darkness.
Yes, there were clues. This extraordinary revelation that this man who had twice been sacked from government for lying had lied. And there was a bit of a query, and it was interesting, a lot of people commenting online, and Emily Thornberry, the chair, coming back, and 2 or 3 people actually coming back on this, because something he'd said a little bit earlier, he was asked by Emily Thornberry, do you think it's appropriate when doing the due diligence? And it kept referring to DD and DV. These are different things. Due diligence is a report that the Cabinet Office got together. They also mention PET, don't they, which is the Propriety and Ethics sort of team at the Cabinet Office. Lots of those acronyms. And they said the due diligence was that document the Prime Minister's admitted seeing. And he only said, but if I'd known now what I known then what I knew now, then I would never have appointed Mandelson. Except we know categorically he was shown this due diligence report and read it, according to Morgan Mcweeny. He said that in the last 10 minutes or so. And this is a report that had flagged up things like he was still mates with Jeffrey Epstein. He'd stayed in his house while he was in prison after his conviction for soliciting an underage girl for prostitution. His links with Deripaska, this Mr. Dodgy Russian, his Chinese government, Chinese government linked firm clients with his firm. This was all in the report. So even with all of that, he went, let's appoint him because, he'll work his Mandelson magic. I mean, this is a big question mark. But it is interesting that Morgan Mcweeny has said, he said, when I look back on it, I certainly think it would have been much, much better if I'd asked for this ethics team to ask follow-up questions. Because he was asking, was it a good idea that basically you, a mate of Peter Mandelson, and Matthew Doyle, then the Director of Communications, a mate of Peter Mandelson, basically asked, not in writing, but asked in person. They did the follow-up questions after this vetting by the Cabinet Office, and then nothing else. And his response was basically, it would have. I guess my thinking at the time was that I'd put follow-up questions to him in writing, and that if a senior member of staff did that he would feel more obligated to give the truth and the full truth. I didn't feel that I got that back from him, but it wasn't my decision. It was the Prime Minister's decision, and he saw the developed vetting as part of that decision. Later on, he went back on that and basically said, no, at the time I thought I'd been told the truth, and I discovered to my horror later on I'd not been told the truth. But the whole sodding point of vetting is that, shock horror, lots of people don't tell the truth. Lots of people who have led completely, apparently publicly blameless lives, I've had affairs or had some money from someone they haven't declared that it's a conflict of interest and maybe don't realise it's a problem, or don't want to reveal it, a past ex or something that might be an issue. They don't. But someone who has been a proven liar, whose questionable judgment was in plain sight, but apparently didn't raise any red flags. I'm fascinated. Quite a lot of people who are on the Labour side, they've been saying earlier that Sir Philip Barton, the former chief of the Foreign Office, that his evidence has helped Starmer. On the contrary, he has backed up everything that Ollie Robbins said. Both Ollie Robbins, Philip Barton and the head of security at the Foreign Office, security vetting, they're saying one thing and the Prime Minister is saying something else. Who are we going to believe? Come on. Now, this is extraordinary, and it seems to me that Morgan Mcweeny has also, whilst trying to defend his boss put the boot in a little bit.
Oh no, absolutely, especially in trying to imply that at least at a certain point he was more sceptical after those September revelations back in 2024 of what Mandelson had been saying, and also trying to remind people that ultimately this was the Prime Minister's judgment, that he was there to advise, which again is the point, advisors advise and the politicians are the one who ultimately have to decide. I also thought it was very interesting how desperately he was trying to put some distance between himself and Mandelson, saying that I only met him properly for the first time.
Wasn't my mentor. I didn't think he was a hero.
We only really kind of would begin to consult more directly in 2021, and that this image which has been built up of, as one report put it, you know, Mcweeny wouldn't breathe without consulting with Mandelson first, is for the birds. So there's clearly a kind of sense of wanting to, as he would see it, set the record straight. But we can talk about the procedure, we could talk about the timeline, we could do that till the cows come home. You come back to the fundamental point. You're right, Julia. The point of vetting, the point of due diligence, is to say we can't take you at your words. Let's look into your background. Let's see if there's any skeletons in the closet. Peter Mandelson, even before this process, had skeletons on the front lawn. Everyone knew about all of this. Everyone knew that when it came to being completely on the up and up, that wasn't something that you could count on where he was concerned. He was nicknamed the Prince of Darkness. It was a spectacular failure of judgment for them to appoint him, even with what they could have gathered from a cursory Google search or skim of his Wikipedia article.
And
you
this
did not need any of this to realise that this could have ended
exactly, which is why you have vetting anyway. And basically, it was very clear. Everyone's backed up the same thing. It was basically the Prime Minister decided he was going to have this guy, and it was simple. That was the end of the matter. But it's interesting. Another key point he said at one point, his exact words: the Prime Minister had all the knowledge that I had. Now, he can't say, he's been very clear, but it was interesting. He said, the Prime Minister was not aware enough, though. He said Mandelson wasn't open enough. He wasn't honest. He didn't tell the whole truth. If Mandelson had been honest, he would not have been appointed. Yeah, but if's doing a lot of heavy lifting, isn't it? But he said, why did you? He was asking, why did you trust him? And he said, I thought he cared about his country and his party. Why? Why would you think that? Had you met him? You have. As you said, the Prince of Darkness, a man who clearly cared only about himself and his own bank balance.
I mean, that image that Mcweeny tried to paint there, of Peter Mandelson as just this great public servant, that was the point when the wheels came off.
Absolutely. Well, look, we've left the committee. We're going to go to the House of Commons right now, where the debate on whether the Privileges Committee should consider if the Prime Minister misled the House of Commons. He did, over the appointment of Peter Mandelson. Has just started. Kemi Badenoch is currently speaking. Let's go live to hear what Kemi Badenoch has to say.
Why are they acting like sheep? They should be better than that. We will be counting, by the way. Some people might even be shouting bingo at how many times people stand up and say that this is a stunt in this debate. We're looking forward to it. Mr. Speaker, there is a... Yes, I will give way.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend. I think she's being a little too harsh to the limited number of Labour MPs opposite. I mean, here we have the entire reputation of the Prime Minister of this country, the leader of their party, and they're not turning out for him because they know that he is now a laughingstock, and having called round them, they found out they had to put a 3-line whip to get them to protect his blushes. So, can my right honourable friend be a little bit kinder to the members opposite, especially the brave ones who are actually prepared to come out and defend the indefensible?
I thank my right honourable friend for that intervention. I will do my best to be kind, because he is right. There are more people here today than there were last time, so the whips have really been working hard in the last 7 days. Last week, not a single Labour MP bothered to intervene. Now, we've got a second one. I'm going to take an intervention from the right honourable gentleman, and then I'll come to the Labour MP.
Very grateful to the Leader of the Opposition. She's right to highlight the cross-party nature of this motion and also question the applicability of a whip in refusing a motion before the House. Does she not agree, and should Labour MPs not consider that if there's nothing to hide, there's nothing to fear?
The honourable gentleman makes an excellent point. I completely agree with him, and in fact I will be making that case in due course, but I will give way to the honourable gentleman.
Well, I thank her for giving way, and a moment ago she talked about selective quoting, and I'm sure that she would not want to selectively quote Sir Ollie Robbins herself. So could she tell us what the rest of that quote was? And when he talked about pressure, was he talking about pressure to deliver a decision in time for President Trump's inauguration? Or was he saying that he felt pressure to materially change what that decision would be? Because that is quite an important distinction, is it not?
It is quite important, and if it was, why didn't the Prime Minister say so last week? Why didn't he say no pressure whatsoever? He should go and read the Hansard, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yes, I will give way on that point.
My right friend, for giving way on that point. Are we really suggesting in this debate in this chamber that anyone who does not fully, comprehensively, without any hesitation, pass vetting, should be given the most important role in our ambassadorship? The opposition seem to be suggesting that someone who is borderline, that there are any red flags, should be put in this sort of role. Is that not absolutely extraordinary?
That's not due process. It is extraordinary, and the evidence which we've heard from the Foreign Affairs Select Committee this morning is only making this matter worse for the Prime Minister. So it is very wrong for them to be talking about a stunt. This is about the integrity of this House. Why is the Privileges Committee only a political stunt when Labour is in the dock? Do they still believe that honesty and accountability matter when it is one of their own? Do they believe that Labour Prime Ministers should be held to the exact same standards that they held Conservative Prime Ministers to? Or do they believe that there should be an honesty discount because the Prime Minister is Labour? The fact that there are so few cabinet ministers sitting on the front bench, they've had to dig deep to the bottom of the barrel for junior ministers to come and sit there, I think shows that they're struggling to get support for this. But let me tell Labour, I'm going to make some progress, Mr. Speaker. Let me, I would say very gently, in fact kindly, I would say kindly to Labour MPs, as I've been asked to, that if they vote against this motion today, they are admitting that Labour has lower standards and should be held to a lower standard than everyone else. Because when they were elected, they promised their constituents integrity and higher standards, and I'm sure for most of them at the time they meant it. This country is the mother of all parliaments. This vote today is about Parliament. It's not about the Labour Party. It is about the Prime Minister being held to account. To those people saying this is a stunt, this is about whether the Prime Minister is accountable